record. We now come to the general debate on road maintenance. I call the Secretary of State to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long, Britain has been plagued by potholes. Too many people in too many parts of the country have had their everyday journeys turned into frustrating obstacle courses by our pock-marked roads. But it's worse than that. Cratered roads can be dangerous. They make our trips longer and more stressful, and they consume the hard-earned cash of ordinary families. With the average vehicle repair now costing a staggering £600, it's little wonder the AA tells us this is an issue of priority for 96% of drivers. But it's not just motorists who are suffering. Damaged roads cause problems for cyclists, motorcyclists and pedestrians. And dodgy pavements are infuriating if you're pushing a pram or using a wheelchair. I will give way.
I thank my friend for giving way. She reminded me of my road where I live, where the issue of a pothole actually led to the issues with pavement because people were trying to avoid the pothole going onto the pavement and led to the pavement being damaged. So would she agree that actually quick fixing of potholes will actually save the pavements as well?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend describes a win-win situation.
Would you give way?
I will give way.
Melanie on.
I thank the right honourable lady for giving way. And on Friday at my constituency surgery, my constituent Helen came to see me because she had a terrible fall on a badly maintained pavement and has been really struggling to find who is responsible for maintaining the pavement. And is there anything within the legislation that, or within the funding that has been brought forward by this government to enable quick and easy repairs to pavement so that people like Helen don't have terrible accidents?
Secretary of State.
Local authorities are free to use the money as they see fit, as long as they are using that money in a way that represents value for money for the taxpayer. But the money can be used for work on the roads, on the pavements, or to structures. And the issue of responsibility will be for the local highways authority with respect to her constituent. I will give way.
Julian Lewis.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State giving way. I thought I'd get in before she gets back into her stride. I wonder if she can throw some light on an issue that's puzzled me for some time in my New Forest East constituency, which is that there is a stretch of road, Southampton Road, which is often used as a shortcut by very heavy goods vehicles who, rather than using the appropriate section of the M27 motorway. And these are often very large petrol bowsers, tankers, you name it. And surprise, surprise, the roadway is constantly getting broken up and potholes appear with all the consequences she alleges. Whenever we've raised this with any of the companies to which these heavy vehicles belong, they say, well, it's a public highway, we're entitled to drive these vehicles where we want. Is there any obligation on companies not to do that?
Secretary of State.
I don't know whether the honourable gentleman has raised the matter with the local highways authority, and I believe there may be the ability to apply a weight restriction on roads or to curtail the movement of large heavy goods vehicles, and so it might be something that he wishes to raise with the appropriate authority. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was describing the frustrating state of our roads and pavements, but I think most importantly the country's broken roads have become sadly a symbol of the national decline that were presided over by the previous government. Our roads have compounded a feeling that nothing works in this country. They tell a story of a country left in a woeful state of disrepair after 14 long years of the previous government. Roads are the backbone of our transport system. They are the concrete arteries of our local and regional economies. Yet too often they fall way short of the standards we should be able to expect in the 21st century. That's why this government is taking decisive action to deliver the renewal of our roads. We ploughed... I will give way.
Thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Madam Deputy Speaker, you might not be aware there is such a thing as the RAC Pothole Index, and that shows that something like 4 out of 10 incidents of damage to vehicles, to cars, are as a result of potholes. So drivers, owners of vehicles are paying their road tax, they're paying their fuel duty, and then of course they have not the infrastructure of the roads to support them. So I welcome what the government is doing in terms of its support for filling potholes, but can we ensure that the motorist is looked after under this government?
Secretary of State.
I can give my honourable friend that assurance, and that's why we've ploughed a record £1.6 billion into roads maintenance, including a £500 million uplift on last year. This is on top, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the £200 million or so that we are putting in the hands of local leaders in the big city regions, empowering mayoral combined authorities to mend the roads in their communities. That means... I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving me way. One of the questions that's often asked of me is that we've spoken about quick fixes. The problem is that we fix a few potholes, but the disrepair reappears. Does my right honourable friend agree that we should actually be focusing on resurfacing our roads?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is completely right, and in some cases preventative, comprehensive road resurfacing will be the appropriate action to take. Madam Deputy Speaker, in total we're investing around £1.8 billion in fixing our local roads this year. I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way and for the record investment of this Labour government in fixing our potholes. I particularly welcome the £21 million for East Sussex to fix our roads. But does she share my frustration that Conservative-run East Sussex County Council has told me they are going to have a lower highways budget this year than last year, even with that record injection from the Labour government? And actually we need to track how they're spending that money. So I welcome the government's commitment to making councils publish reports of how that extra pothole money is spent, and I hope it will include a geographical breakdown so I can make sure Hastings Rye and the villages is getting its fair share.
Secretary of State.
We are asking local authorities to publish a report on their websites by June of this year. We are tipping more money into highways maintenance, and it's absolutely right that people should see visible results on their roads, and it's right that she is holding her local Conservative council to account. Madam Deputy Speaker, our investment in highways maintenance is not a sticking plaster solution. It's a vital investment that could see councils fixing an extra 7 million potholes next year. And it's just the beginning because, as I've said, for the first time, we've asked councils to prove they're using their funding wisely. By June, they'll be asked, as I've just said, to report on how many potholes they've filled and provide an update on the condition of their roads. And if we're not satisfied that they're delivering real value for money, councils risk losing up to a quarter of their funding uplift. I will give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Surrey have 70,000 potholes, 5% of all the nation's potholes, the most in the country. So I welcome the extra money for potholes, but given the recklessness of the Conservative Surrey, how will that help my constituents?
Secretary of State.
The wider transparency and accountability measures that we have announced, where we're withholding a quarter of the funding uplift until such time as the local authority has demonstrated how they are using that money, will hopefully be of assistance to both her and her constituents. I think it's only right that taxpayers can see how their money is being spent. And this new era of accountability and transparency will see their cash being put to good use, and road users will see the results. I'll just make a little bit of progress and I will give way to the honourable gentleman later. This government will end decades of decay on our roads. We'll lift the lid on how taxpayers' money gets spent, and we think this is a crucial part of the solution. I'm pleased that this move has been positively received, with the RAC, National Highways, Logistics UK and so many more coming out in support. In fact, Edmund King, president of the AA, described it as a concerted attack on the plague of potholes. Madam Deputy Speaker, I couldn't have put it better myself. It's great to see councils broadly welcoming our approach too. As Councillor Adam Hugg, Transport spokesperson for the Local Government Association, put it, it's in everyone's interest to ensure that public money is well spent. I will give way.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, from one Adam to another. When I was a child, my late grandmother used to say that you could always tell a drunk person who are you because they drove in a straight line. One of my constituents said to me recently that in the United Kingdom we're meant to drive on the left-hand side of the road, but in Newcastle Line many people drive on what's left of the road. So can I ask? So they're very wise people in North Staffordshire, Madam Deputy Speaker. So can I ask the Secretary of State, who's making an excellent speech, what her two messages would be? One, to the good people of Newcastle Lyme as we approach Thursday, May the 1st, and secondly, what she would say to the current Conservative leadership of Staffordshire County Council.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, first of all, what I'd like to say to his constituents in Newcastle under Lyme is congratulations on an excellent sense of humour and a perceptive community in describing the state of roads in his constituency. And I would say simply to his local authority, they've got no excuse. They've got the money, get on and fix it. Madam Deputy Speaker, as much as we want to see councils going full steam ahead on road repairs, I also know that roadworks can be disruptive. We've all felt the frustration of being stuck at temporary traffic lights or the sound of a pneumatic drill on a Sunday morning. That's why we're clamping down on companies who fail to comply with the rules by doubling a range of fixed penalty notices, with the worst offences now facing £1,000 fines. Plus, we're extending charges for street works that run into the weekend. This isn't about patching up the problem either. We want to see repairs that are made to last, so we don't see the same bits of road being dug up over and over again. This means getting it right first time round, championing the best materials and techniques, ensuring contractors are properly managed, and embracing the innovation and new technology that will help us get the job done whilst getting proper bang for our buck. I'll give way.
Shannon.
Surely it's of anybody in this chamber not to welcome all of the money the Honourable Lady has said that she's going to spend on roads, and that's welcome. I understand there's new technology, Madam Deputy Speaker. Technology is a better and more modern way of fixing potholes. I understand that it does the job better, it's cheaper. And if that is the case, I met the manager of my constituency in Strangford last Friday, and he was telling me he would be very interested in this scheme, and he doesn't know about it. Would the Minister share that new way of fixing potholes? And if so, then everybody in the United Kingdom of Great Britain can benefit from it. Thank you so much.
Secretary of State.
We are running a number of live lab projects to look at how we can best make use of AI and new technology to ensure we're getting that really good value for money in the way in which we're delivering roads maintenance. And over the next year, we will also be working with the UK Roads Leadership Group to update the code of practice on well-maintained highways. And I'd be happy to speak to the Honourable Gentleman further about what he has learned. The important work that we are doing will help set clear expectations for local authorities up and down the country, meaning cleaner, greener, better roads delivered with the needs of local people in mind. I will give way.
Thank you, friend. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Lawrence, Eileen and the residents of St Quivocks have been campaigning for 10 years to cut the speed on the B743 in my constituency. 45 people were delighted to hear at this weekend's public meeting that Sergeant Slavin of Police Scotland and South Ayrshire Council's Director Kevin Braidwood support their campaign to cut the speed on this dangerous road, which has seen almost 30 accidents in the last decade. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that Ayrshire Roads Alliance and South Ayrshire Council need urgently to reduce the speed limit on this road and work with residents to introduce other traffic calming measures?
Secretary of State.
It's a decision for local highways authorities about what the appropriate speed limit is on their road, and I won't pretend to know the detail of what he is talking about, but I would say that safety is an absolute priority for this government, and any local highway authority should be taking appropriate decisions to limit the number of people who are being injured on our roads, and ideally to eradicate death and serious injury. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government's ambition for road users stretches far beyond local roads. Just last week, we announced £4.8 billion for national highways to deliver critical road schemes alongside maintaining motorways and major A roads. This is a bold investment and higher than the average annual funding from the last multi-year settlement. It will mean we can get on with vital schemes in construction, such as the A57 Greater Manchester Link Road, the A428 Black Cat scheme in Cambridgeshire, the A47 Thickthorn scheme near Norwich, which will unlock 3,000 new homes. I hear appreciation from the honourable gentleman on the front bench opposite, and indeed the M3 Junction 9 scheme in Hampshire, which will support 2,000 more homes as well. By raising living standards, creating high-quality jobs and kick-starting economic growth, these projects will drive this government's plan for change. We are committed to delivering the road infrastructure this country needs today, tomorrow and far into the future. That's why we are already working on the next multi-year road investment strategy to do just that. This is part of our mission to secure the future of Britain's infrastructure. We're building better roads, creating safer streets and unlocking more efficient transport systems to help businesses thrive and make life easier for all. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Extremely grateful to the honourable lady, and when she leaves South Swindon and goes into Wiltshire, she should be pleased that the 20.7 million money that the government has given to Wiltshire has been added to by 22 million put aside by Wiltshire Council to maximise the impact. But could she say something about the connectivity between Bristol and Southampton? I was grateful for the meeting with her colleague, the Minister, but does she recognise, now that the scheme of the 303 is not happening, that there is a need in Wiltshire for greater investment on north-south connectivity in the county?
Secretary of State.
I am aware that the honourable gentleman met with my honourable friend, the Minister for the Future of Roads, and as a follow-up to that meeting, I understand that National Highways are looking into the very issue that he describes. One last time.
David Smith.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way. And on that point of road safety, the last Conservative government singularly failed to dual the A1 in my constituency of North Northumberland. And the attention must turn now to road safety of that road. So can I ask the Secretary of State and perhaps the Minister to come and join me in the constituency to see the conversations I've been having with National Highways about how we can improve the A1?
Secretary of State.
I know my honourable friend, the Minister for the Future of Roads, would be very happy to visit the honourable gentleman in his constituency. Whilst we can't reopen the decision about redualing the A1, we are happy to look at whether there are some smaller scale schemes that could address specific issues around safety and congestion on that very, very important road. Madam Deputy Speaker, the public is tired of seeing roads left to deteriorate with no accountability for how maintenance money is spent. This government is laying the foundations for change, and this is just the beginning. There is so much more to do as we restore our transport system so people across Britain can fulfil their potential. A Britain where those everyday journeys are smoother and safer, a Britain where families aren't shelling out for expensive and unexpected repairs, where hard-working people have more money in their pockets, and a Britain not defined by disrepair and disarray, but where improved infrastructure becomes a symbol of our national renewal. Madam Deputy Speaker, improving connectivity will unlock jobs, growth and opportunities across the country by fixing our roads, building better infrastructure and making sure that transport works for all. This government is securing Britain's future.
The question is that this House has considered road maintenance. Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow on from the Right Honourable Secretary of State. Each year we travel, well, the Liberal Democrats and their friends travel about 800 billion kilometres, and for those on these benches we travel about 500 billion miles. 90% of that is by road. It's the backbone of our transport network. Roads deliver goods, they deliver services, and importantly, they deliver people as well. They deliver economic growth and human flourishing. Workers to their jobs, students to their schools, patients to their hospitals, and they bring families together. So it's absolutely right, I think we can all unite around this, that good roads deliver a stronger economy and a stronger society. The roads network is divided. It's divided between the national infrastructure as well as local roads. And since local roads make up 97.3% of the network as a whole, some 203,000, nearly 204,000 miles, I think it's best that I start there. Because at the heart of the problem for potholes is with our local roads. Legal responsibility for maintenance of those roads lies with local authorities, but it's too easy for us to blame local authorities and move on because their funding comes centrally. And it's the last government had a degree of frustration, which I know is now shared by the current government, that some local authorities were better than others at clearing up potholes, and yet the government, of whatever colour, tends to get the blame. Now, the Prime Minister has taken a view on this. He seems to be frustrated as well. So we have last month's announcement that local authorities were required to publish reports on how many potholes they've repaired. That is not a novel undertaking. They were required back in 2013 or 14 to do exactly the same thing, I recall. But I will just in a second. But the risk is that if they haven't repaired sufficient numbers of potholes, then they risk losing 25% of their increased grant, and I will give way.
Thank the honourable gentleman. Do you agree that adopting a policy of managed decline, as the Conservatives did in Oxfordshire in 2014, is a disaster and really not the appropriate way to start fixing the problems we have in front of us?
I would absolutely agree that managed decline is not the right way, but I refute the accusation that the Conservative government managed decline, and I'll come on in a few moments to look at. Well, let's look at the data. Let's look at the data, because one of the honourable gentlemen on the opposite benches made reference to the RAC pothole index. It's a very useful piece of information because what it does is it tracks how much more likely you are to suffer a breakdown as a result of a pothole, Madam Deputy Speaker. And this information, this data goes back to 2006 when Labour was in power. And you may not be wholly surprised to learn, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it was under the last Labour government that you were more than twice as likely to suffer a breakdown as a result of a pothole than you are under the subsequent Conservative government. And that is corrected for seasonal weather effects and improving longer-term vehicle reliability. So for the members opposite, Madam Deputy Speaker, to say that the Conservative government managed decline, in fact, it's exactly the opposite. It peaked. Unreliability. So breakdowns caused by potholes peaked under Labour in 2009, and it has more than halved as a result of the investment of the last coalition and Conservative governments. I will give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Birmingham City Council is the largest council in Europe, has some of the vast number of roads and arterial routes coming into the city and out of the city with the Spaghetti Junction. The Labour-run council has been in post for somewhat a decade, and roads are just simply getting from bad to worse. Part of the problem is the desensitisation of the residents, which just feel that there's no point complaining about a pothole. Officers come out, don't repair it. So what mechanisms need to be put in place so we can address the potholes that exist that are getting worse?
The best mechanism is to vote for a Conservative local authority on the 1st of May. Because if you look, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the data rather than the slogans, under Conservative councils, on average, 68 miles of roads are repaired each year. Under Labour councils, it's just 14. So I say again, if you want potholes fixed, you vote Conservative on the 1st of May. I will give way.
Grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the Shadow Minister for giving way. And I get on with him relatively well, but he just made the point that people, well, very well, I'll be even better when he agrees with my point. That people should vote Conservative because of the successes to which he's just referred. What would he say to my constituents in Newcastle and Lyme, who have a Tory borough council and county council, and have done for several years, who describe our roads as deeply sunken and physically uncomfortable to drive over, crumbling surfaces, failed resurfacing work and repairs that don't last, worsening conditions despite recent repairs. Several respondents noted that only a few potholes were ever patched. Hazardous conditions for multiple directions.
Order. Interventions are getting far too long. There is a very long list of speakers who wish to contribute to this evening's debate, so it might be as well that interventions were kept short and pithy. Jerome Mayhew.
Well, I'm grateful for the question, and I hope we got on better than that, but very good. Everyone in this chamber will be able to point at potholes, and I'll come on to that in a minute, and say that more needs to be done. And we are all right. We are all correct that we have far too many potholes, and we need to build and repair and improve over time our network. But I accept, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it's not just voting Conservative that reduces potholes overall, but there is a question of prioritisation, both under Labour and under Conservatives, but also, and importantly, it's important how funding is provided, because it's as important. The overall amount of funding for the repair of potholes is crucial, obviously, but how that funding is provided and the long-term nature of that funding is absolutely essential, so that local authorities can schedule their repairs, and by doing so they can increase efficiency, because it's not the stop-start, feast or famine that we hear so much about at the moment. And you can increase the number of potholes being repaired for the amount of money spent. And it was for exactly this reason that the last Conservative government committed to a 10-year, £8.3 billion investment for the repair of potholes. And that long-term approach made an enormous difference. The RAC welcomed the news. The plans would, and I quote, give councils certainty of funding, allowing them to plan proper long-term maintenance. I'm sure you read about this often, Madam Deputy Speaker, but the Asphalt Industry Alliance, they said that there's a consensus among local authorities that guaranteed longer-term funding helps increase efficiency and provide a more resilient road network. And they went on, they said security of funding helps authorities to plan with more confidence and drive greater cost and environmental efficiencies through the promotion of proactive asset management techniques. So the point here, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that long-term predictable funding increases the number of repairs being undertaken and reduces the amount of cost that we have to pay for it. Yes, I will give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable member has raised a couple of figures there, one from 2006, when I think I was 9. A more recent figure from the Alarm 2025 report says that when the Conservatives left office, they left us with a backlog of £16.8 billion worth of pothole repairs needed to be done. What does he say to those people who are still driving over those potholes?
Jerome Mayhew.
Well, I just correct, he may have misunderstood me. The figure that I was referring to was 2009-10, so the very last year of the Labour government. And since then, although there have been variations because of winter and summer in the number of potholes, the number of potholes leading to breakdowns, according to the RAC, which is of course independent, has more than halved. So if you look at the data, I know there are lots of examples where people drive into potholes, including myself and everyone here who drives, but the data overhaul demonstrates beyond doubt that you're better off under Conservatives if you want to avoid potholes causing breakdown than Labour. So back to the point, Madam Deputy Speaker. As I was saying, long-term predictable funding leads to increased number of repairs for a reduced cost. So what has Labour done? They've cancelled that long-term approach. So the predictability of funding for local authority, it's gone. The efficiencies associated with that predictability of funding, gone. The cost savings associated with that predictability of funding, gone. Instead, we've had an announcement of £1.6 billion until 2026, which is very welcome, and I have constructive opposition. So when more funding comes for repair of potholes, I welcome it. But if you look beneath the bonnet, Madam Deputy Speaker, you'll see that at the same time, the Labour government has increased costs to local authorities through their national insurance contributions hike of £1.1 billion. So they give 1.6 billion on one hand, and they take away 1.1 billion from the other. But it doesn't stop there, because their hike on vehicle excise duty over the course of this Parliament is another £1.7 billion being taken from motorists. So they take 1.7 billion from motorists and they give 400 million net back to road improvements. And then after 2026, what happens? Do we know? Does the Secretary of State even herself know where the funding is going to come after that? Because the government has been entirely silent on it, and it's leading local authorities to be deeply concerned about their ability to plan long-term repairs, not just to potholes, but to road infrastructure as well. And it's an example, an unfortunate example, Madam Deputy Speaker, of this government chasing headlines over responsible government. And we move on. That's local roads. Let's move on to the major roadways, the major road network. Because the first act of Labour coming into government wasn't to back our road infrastructure, wasn't to improve repairs. It was to cancel 5 vital road improvement schemes: the A5036 Princess Way, the A358 Taunton to Southfields, the M27 Junction 8 Southampton, which was obliquely referred to earlier, the A47 roundabout at Great Yarmouth, the other end of the Thickthorn roundabout, which the Secretary of State is continuing the previous government's improvement of, and also the A1 Morpeth to Ellingham. So Labour are not prioritising roads, they're not prioritising road users, despite taking another £1.7 billion out of vehicle excise duty. So they're dipping their hands yet further into the pockets of motorists and cancelling major road improvements. And this contrasts with the Conservative record of 2015 to 2025, where they invested £40 billion into England's strategic road network. Short-term headlines over long-term planning. What's coming of Labour's road maintenance plans? I hope this debate will shed further light, will clarify the future funding for road maintenance, and if the Secretary of State is able to whisper into the ear of her minister for her winding up, perhaps she can tell us what happens after 2026, because local authorities deserve better than to be marched up the hill for 2026 with road repairs and then be left in a hole.
Alex Mayer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's like driving over the surface of the moon. That is what Karen from Houghton Regis told me. Marion and Brian explained how they had had 2 tyres ruined, costing them over £200. A plumber from Dunstable sent me multiple photos of craters in his road, and Councillor Matt Brennan showed me more when we visited Old Banks and Dunstable, and another constituent over in Leighton Buzzard told me that Mile Tree Road has increasingly become hazardous because of the number of potholes. After 14 years of Conservative rule and the increasing effects of climate change, too many of our roads are in a sorry state. And in fact, figures from the RAC show that drivers encounter on average 6 potholes per mile in England and Wales. And that's bad news for car drivers, but also for cyclists and bus users and coaches. So I welcome the government's investment in improving our road conditions once again. This Labour government has increased the funding to Central Bedfordshire Council to nearly £9.7 million this year, which represents a 39.7% increase. Now that sounds like really good news, and you'd have thought more potholes would get filled in. So I was really concerned to see that the council budget showed only a 5% increase in highways spending. Now, I appreciate that Central Bedfordshire Council also contributes capital to the highways budget, along with the government. But I have to say, I was really hugely disappointed by a statement made at the Joint Budget Scrutiny Task Force Committee, and I quote, "When the government announced that we would receive more funding, the decision was made to spend less of our own money rather than increase the programme." Now, I have warned that this kind of attitude could jeopardise the full uplift of government funding, and I would be very grateful for the Secretary of State's thoughts on this. Now, in light of this, I particularly welcome the government's plan for councils to publish reports on their websites, as we've heard, by the end of June, detailing what they're doing to improve the state of local roads. I was especially pleased that we're told that it's going to be a short report and in plain English, which I think all reports should be, really. But I thought what was particularly important as well was that the template means that the council has to show how many holes they filled in the previous 5 years, because I know that residents will expect and indeed deserve to see the number of potholes being filled in increasing. So we are all watching this space. I know that councils will also be required to show how they're spending more on long-term preventative maintenance programmes, and that is incredibly important. As I've said, we're living in a time of climate emergency, and the wetter winters and extremes of hot and cold are making potholes worse, increasing the number of freeze and thaw cycles. But there are some emerging technologies that may help. AI can apparently identify cracks and spot the potholes before they appear. There's graphene-reinforced asphalt, self-healing as well, and bacteria-infused cement, and systems to regulate road temperatures. And tech is clearly moving apace. And given all of these innovations, I'd be grateful if the Secretary of State would let us know if she's considering updating the department's guidance on preventing potholes during the winter. And while we're on the subject of climate change, well-maintained and smoother roads, they do reduce fuel consumption and cut emissions. Data showing that smoother roads can reduce vehicle emissions by more than 5%. But the opposite is true when you've got bad roads. So the Centre for Economics and Business Research actually found that poor road conditions impact upon driver behaviour. I think we know that as we try and swerve around potholes. And because drivers are speeding up and slowing down, they have calculated that emissions are about 0.5 tonnes of CO2 higher because of that changed driver behaviour. Now, it's also crucial, I would say, Madam Deputy Speaker, to minimise the disruption caused by utility companies' street works. And I know that this is something that ministers have repeatedly stated. Because we know that when you open up a road with a trench, it can reduce its structural life by an average of 17%. So I would therefore draw all honourable members' attention to the street works inquiry that the Transport Select Committee, that I and other honourable members are members of, which we're currently carrying out. So you can tune in to any of the evidence sessions, and then the final report will be available very soon, in all good vote offices. So we're all familiar, I think, with instances where the same stretch of road or pavement seems to be repeatedly opened up by different companies over a very short period of time. I think this is actually a particular problem when you've got new developments. So, for example, a constituent wrote to me about Bedford Road in Houghton Regis, saying that over the period of roughly a month, 5 different companies have dug up the road, one after another. And when I queried that with the council's streetworks team, I was informed, and I quote on this, no collaboration opportunities were identified to reduce the number of road closures. I mean, the situation residents think is frankly ridiculous. Now let me turn to cost. In April 2024, the Centre for Economics and Business Research reported that poor road conditions were costing £14.4 billion a year in economic damage to England, or 60% of a Tory government black hole, as I like to think of it. But there is hope, because I know the Department for Transport's economic appraisal tells us that for every £1 invested in local road maintenance, there is a minimum return of £2.20 and typical returns identified up to £9.10 at a national level. Finally, let me turn to buses and coaches. Unlike motorists, car motorists, cyclists and pedestrians, they can often take different routes when there's a particularly bad potholed road or it's closed because of the potholes. But buses have got an obligation to stick to their routes wherever possible. And the Confederation of Passenger Transport highlights a 13% increase in bus operators' costs per kilometre since 2019. And much of this is attributed to delays and diversions and disruption, including caused by the poor state of roads. And First Bus told me that they spend over £1 million each year repairing bus suspension components. And that cost inevitably gets passed on to passengers through higher fares and reduced service levels. So I welcome the Labour government's investment in road maintenance, and I sincerely hope that all local councils rise to the challenge. For my constituent who thinks it's like driving on the moon, this really isn't rocket science, but nor is it just a matter of inconvenience. Filling in these potholes is crucial for safety, the environment, and for economic growth.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And from local people across the constituency, I receive countless emails and letters about the shocking state of our roads. People are rightly frustrated at potholes, the little and long waits for repairs forced on them by Bradford Council. And perhaps, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is one of the most important issues that all of us as MPs get correspondence about. Why? Because it impacts each and every day of our, whether it's commuting to work or whether it is simply getting out and about in the car to go and do other things. Because we all care about what the state of our roads is right outside our door. And I just want to take you through my constituency, referencing a few roads and highlighting the level of concern that constituents rightly raise to me. Take Elliott Street in Silsden in my constituency. I was first contacted by residents on this major road through the centre of Silsden years ago, Madam Deputy Speaker. The situation was poor then, and over the last few years has only gotten worse and worse, to the extent that people were referencing this on social media as being a mere joke, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the state of the road that Labour-run Bradford Council had left it in. And despite consistently raising this with Bradford Council, it has taken years for them to finally get on with it. And I'm pleased that literally just in the last 2 weeks, the resurfacing works have now finished. The works are welcome, of course they are, but but residents on Elliott Street and indeed across the wider Silsden area should not have been having to wait years for such a busy and important road to be repaired. Elliott Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, is just one example. There are other similar stories within Keighley itself, on Westburn Avenue, on Oakworth Road, on Halifax Road and on North Street. The list goes on and on. In Ilkley, Madam Deputy Speaker, Cow Pasture Road has been lobbied consistently at a very difficult junction that we have at the top of Cow Pasture Road, right outside north of Ilkley Grammar, for the junction to be better looked at by our local Conservative councillors. David Nuns and Andrew Loy have consistently been lobbying Bradford Council to look at this dangerous junction. In the Worth Valley, Madam Deputy Speaker, the sides of the roads are crumbling on Hill House Edge Lane, with cars getting stuck in the ditches as they pass one another. And again, local Conservative councillors, Councillor Rebecca Paulson, Chris Hurd and Russell Brown, have consistently been lobbying Labour-run Bradford Council to sort this issue out, but yet no repairs have been undertaken. And I will give way to the honourable member.
Thank the honourable member for giving way. Not to make this too political, but just to kind of give a little bit of a view that I'm not a member for Bradford, although it should be noted, I think, that £350 million of revenue funding has been cut from Bradford Council since 2010, and they're doing an awful lot in a very difficult circumstance, brought around by his 14 years of Tory government.
I'm very pleased that the honourable member brought this issue up, because just in 2021, Bradford Council, through their statutory responsibility to provide feedback to MHCLG, or DLUC as it was at the time, reported, Madam Deputy Speaker, just in 2021, that they were in sound financial health. And actually, that was a year in which they applied to be City of Culture. And then, Madam Deputy Speaker, this year, residents across the Keighley and Ilkley constituency are now faced with a 10% increase in council tax, despite the state of our roads being in such a poor state. And it leads me on to a freedom of information request that I put to Bradford Council. And I was astounded to find out by this, and I welcome actually the Secretary of State's announcement today that there will be more transparency that is put on our local councils, because between 2017 and 2022, I obtained, through a freedom of information request to Bradford Council, that just 4% Just 4%, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the identified spending for highways over that 6-year period was actually allocated to my constituency of Keighley and Ilkley. For reference, Madam Deputy Speaker, Labour-run Bradford Council were able to find and allocate £13.1 million for the Bradford South constituency, £19.2 million for the Bradford East constituency, £17.4 million for the Bradford West constituency, but only, Madam Deputy Speaker, over that 6-year period, just £4.1 million was spent across the Keighley and Ilkley constituency on highway spending. That is despite many concerns, quite rightly, being raised from residents across Keighley, Ilkley, the Worth Valley, Silsden, Steeton, wherever they may be in my constituency, complaining, quite rightly, about repairs of roads not being undertaken, pavements not being addressed, potholes not being looked at. So it is no wonder that that constituents are losing trust in our local Labour-run authority. And the list goes on, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether it is concerns that are being raised from local Conservative councillors trying to hold Labour-run Bradford Council to account, but yet we unfortunately seemed not to be getting anywhere and not being listened to. And when, Madam Deputy Speaker, Bradford Council do spend money on roads in my patch, the question is, do they actually spend that money on what people want it to be spent on? And of course they don't, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because when Bradford Council spent nearly or over £100,000 with an £87,500 contribution from Ilkley Town Council on roads in Ilkley, we got speed humps and a blanket 20-mile-an-hour zone, not our potholes being addressed in Ilkley. And in a parish council referendum on this very issue, 98.3% of people in Ilkley opposed this scheme, opposed a rollout of speed bumps, way over 100 speed bumps being rolled out in the centre of Ilkley. So if you asked anyone in Ilkley, Madam Deputy Speaker, what they would like, a good proportion of the 200 grand being spent on our roads, they would say, quite rightly, fix the potholes, sort out that junction at the top of Cow Pasture Road. But Bradford Council wouldn't listen. They go against a public referendum on this issue and instead spend the money on more speed humps, contrary to what the people in Ilkley quite rightly advocated through actually having a vote on this issue at the ballot box. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is the government going to do to ensure that my constituents get their fair deal on their roads from Bradford Council? It is no good the Secretary of State promising greater investment into roads, which of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, is absolutely vital and welcomed, but it is no good allocating these promises when the funds don't simply get past the dictatorial local council without allocating that money to my constituency in Keighley and Ilkley. In Keighley and Ilkley, we deserve our fair share, but unfortunately Bradford Council are more than happy to allocate our council tax and any central government funds that come in to the Bradford district, not on the roads in Keighley and Ilkley, Silsden, the Worth Valley, but instead in Bradford City itself. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's about time that we had our fair share of highway spending in our constituency across Keighley and Ilkley.
Oliver Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As many members of this House will recognise, road maintenance is something that deeply resonates with all of our constituents and is a basic need. People across my constituency leave their homes every day in cars they pay tax on to drive on roads that they are taxed to upkeep that just aren't up to standard in Burnley, Padiham and Briarfield. 14 years of underfunding and a Tory county council that my residents tell me couldn't care less about our roads in our area because it's not an area that typically votes for them. It's just not good enough. When I was out and about on the doorsteps during the election, this issue came up over and over again. Potholes, crumbling roads became totemic, became a metaphor for crumbling council services. Cash for our area was stripped back year after year after year, not just for roads but for development and growth too, while they announced game show style checks and told us we were being levelled up. It felt like a PR exercise, and, Madam Deputy Speaker, it was a PR exercise. From Burnley to Padiham and down the streets of Briarfield, the people I represent shared their frustration with me.
and I share that frustration too. For too long, our local roads have been left to deteriorate while the previous government failed to take action. It was a failure not just of investment, but of attention. Attention to the everyday concerns of people simply trying to get to work, to take their kids to school, or to visit loved ones. When roads crumble, it's not just a nuisance, it becomes a safety hazard. It damages vehicles, it erodes public confidence in the government to do the bare minimum. Constituents ask me, how can something so basic, so essential to daily life be left to crumble in this way? We cannot claim to be serious about economic growth, about opportunities, as Secretary of State said, if we can't even assure people that they won't have to drive on surfaces that are similar to the dirt roads of the Aussie outback. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I stand here today encouraged because I'm proud to support a government that is now doing things differently, taking meaningful and measurable investment, getting things done and delivering. The Minister has made a clear commitment to reversing the decline in local road conditions, and we are about to see the results. £1.6 billion for roads this year, enough to fill 21 million potholes. Lancashire is receiving a total funding package of £46.825 million for the 2025-26 financial year, which is a 40% uplift in what was allocated in the previous financial year, and taking their full road repair fund to £65 million. And this investment is not just a number on a spreadsheet, although they're certainly welcome. This is real, meaningful progress. It sends a message that we're prioritising roads so that many of our constituents can use them every day. This is a historic funding package for our roads. But I'm disappointed that the County Council, Lancashire County Council, Tory-run Lancashire County Council, has only seen fit to resurface 3 roads in the whole of Burnley and Padiham this year, declared so far. Queen Victoria Road, Broadshire Avenue and Bank Parade. All very welcome, but for the amount of money we're putting in, we need to see more. The resurfacing of roads in Burnley, Padiham and Briarfield is about more than asphalt. It's about improving road safety, reducing vehicle repair costs and boosting accessibility for everyone. It's about making our towns easier, safer and more pleasant to live and move around in. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, while we're making progress, as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, it would be remiss of me not to mention the committee's recent report into the condition and maintenance of local roads in England. We, the committee, found that the department's data in this area wasn't sufficient and that accountability in road maintenance is still far too fragmented. And we can't afford to play pass the parcel between local and national authorities when our roads are falling apart beneath our feet. The committee said that the DFT should take greater ownership by improving data collection, clearly defining responsibilities, ensuring local councils have the resources and the oversight to deliver quality, timely maintenance and move away from short-term fixes to longer financial planning of our roads. Indeed, I remember a long time ago, I was an executive member for finance at a Metropolitan Borough Authority myself, and too often over the years I was in that role were we picking the bones of our reserves and capital plans to find one-off pots and short fixes to fund that year's road programme. That can't be reasonable in 21st century Britain. I'm quite pleased, therefore, to see the Prime Minister's recent announcement that councils will have to publish data on how many road repairs they've completed and the money that they've been granted. I remain optimistic for our roads and council services because despite global economic uncertainty and the tightening of public finances across many countries, this government has made a conscious decision to invest in services that matter, to increase day-to-day spending for my council across the turn of the Parliament to get more done for my residents. Madam Deputy Speaker, to finish, in Burnley, Padiham and Briarfield, we are beginning to see the results of decisions are made around the budget. Cash, real cash, going into our roads. The deal is this: you pay your tax, you get decent services. But for many hard-working people, that just hasn't been the case. The basics were cut, while we had to be grateful for the crumbs of levelling up, left with an empty tank and a busted engine, but given a new radio to improve the experience. On the road to nowhere. And that's not the end of my car-related language, Madam Deputy Speaker. While I welcome this money, new money, I will continue to work closely with Lancashire County Council and the Department for Transport to make sure this really good funding for my area, it doesn't stall, it isn't parked for a later date, that we get into gear, we buckle in, we hit the gas, and we deliver on this at speed. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I've driven the point home.
Lib Dem spokesperson Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the government for holding this debate? And can I assure the Shadow Minister, us Lib Dems are wonderfully bilingual and can travel in both kilometres and miles.
In the same direction.
As a Liberal Democrat, this is of course an issue close to my heart. Pothole photos are a staple of Lib Dem literature across the country, and whilst other parties may dismiss our focus on pothole politics, we understand that for millions, the state of our roads is no laughing matter. So I welcome the debate today that the government has called. It's vital that we bring renewed focus to an issue that was desperately neglected by the Conservatives for years. This isn't just a matter for drivers. Whether you commute by car, rely on public transport or cycle, your journey begins on local roads. Their condition directly impacts the daily lives of countless individuals. And the truth is, we are facing a crisis. Despite the previous government's rhetoric about standing up for motorists, their actions have fallen woefully short. The Road Condition Index reveals that almost 25,000 miles, 1 in 10 of England and Wales' road network, requires urgent maintenance within the next year. Whilst less than half our roads are even reported to be in good structural condition. These are not abstract figures. They represent tangible burdens on everyday lives. Data from the RAC shows that, for anything more than a tyre puncture, drivers can expect to pay almost £500 for a pothole-related car repair. The number of pothole-related breakdowns attended by RAC patrols rose by nearly a fifth in the last 3 months of 2024 compared to the previous quarter. Whilst the debate around roads often centres on potholes as the most visible symptom of neglect, the real issue is the underlying condition of our road network. Instead of talking about fixing potholes here and there, we must shift our focus to prevention, not merely reactive repairs. While the government's recent injection of funds is a welcome acknowledgement of the problem, it fails to address the fact that our current road maintenance funding mechanism is simply not fit for purpose. The backlog of repairs is simply too long to be fixed by short-term injections of cash. If this government is serious about tackling this crisis, they must urgently reform the system, give councils the support they need to get on top of the crisis. Local councils are responsible for managing 98% of our national road network and bear the brunt of this challenge. However, they are underfunded and face huge financial pressures. Analysis from the Local Government Association has confirmed that due to continuing inflation and wage pressures, English councils face a £6.2 billion shortfall in funding across the next 2 years. Given the challenges that these councils are facing, from ballooning social care costs and the SEND crisis, highway maintenance, as we've heard from the member of Burnley, is often seen as something that can be postponed until finances improve. Roads require resurfacing roughly every 15 years. However, years of chronic underfunding have forced councils to defer this crucial maintenance, leading to the current pothole plague. This has led to a situation where the average frequency of resurfacing for all classes of roads is now an appalling 93 years. When I recently spoke to a council highway lead, he aptly put it. Roads are like trousers, he said. You can fix a hole here and there with a patch, but it reaches a point where this simply just won't work. Roads in this country are at such a point where we just don't need new trousers, we need a whole new wardrobe. Although local councils are responsible for most of their roads, much of the funding for road maintenance comes from central government. However, the Department of Transport itself has acknowledged the current funding model is inefficient and doesn't deliver good value for money. The annual funding cycle forces councils to reactive, short-term fixes, hindering long-term planning. A longer-term funding settlement would allow councils to plan ahead, move away from this reactive model. Furthermore, the current funding formula, based solely on each local authority's total road mileage, is woefully inadequate. It fails to account for the diverse needs and road usage in different regions, which demands a more nuanced approach. For example, Department for Transport data indicates that Merton, in which most of my constituency lies, has both the second worst uncategorised and B and C roads in the country. Merton, however, received less funding than other areas with more but better roads. Now, in a recent meeting with the Secretary of State, it was suggested by officials that Merton's poor standing may be due to a data error in the figures submitted by the Council. Regardless of the cause, this paints a troubling picture. Either Merton are failing to maintain our roads, or they are failing to actively report their condition, neither of which is acceptable. So can I request the Minister to write to me to clarify the situation? The current formula also neglects active travel infrastructure. While the government has increased active travel funding, there is no provision for the maintenance of these new cycle lanes. Similarly, I regularly hear on the doorstep in Wimbledon complaints about the quality of pavements, which is a particular issue for those with mobility issues. If we are serious about promoting cycling and walking, we must ensure cycle paths and pavements are properly maintained. But without dedicated funding, they will deteriorate, discouraging both their use and the willingness of councils to provide much more such infrastructure.
Will he give way?
Of course, I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me and the Eastbourne Seniors Forum that the state of the pavement outside Halifax, which is like the moon, causing lots of trips and falls, is a disgrace and something that East Sussex County Council need to get on top of straight away to give people confidence in using roads and pavements again?
How could I disagree with the Eastbourne Seniors Forum? Indeed, Eastbourne and Wimbledon and many other constituencies have this same problem with pavements. They're in a shocking, shocking condition. Now, where did I get to? The government claims... Despite lofty talk about fixing the issues, the government has cut the highways maintenance budget by 5% for the forthcoming year. Yeah. The government claims this is a temporary measure and is a one-year funding settlement to cover national highways until their next five-year funding period commences in 2026. So can the Minister please confirm today the government will make up for this shortfall in the funding settlement next year? Our motorways are key to keeping our country and economy moving. We cannot afford to cut costs on such a critical aspect of our infrastructure. To conclude, the Conservatives have led us down the fast lane to decay. There is no doubt our roads are crumbling and motorists, cyclists and bus passengers are paying the price. It is now up to the new government to face up to the challenge. With more short-term injections of cash and a cut to the National Highways budget, their current approach is akin to pulling to a service station for a brief respite. It may delay the journey for a bit, but we remain en route to continuing deterioration. If Labour are serious about fixing our roads, they must sort out the backlog in work needed to allow them to be proactively, not just reactively managed. That requires government to relieve the pressure on local councils by sorting out our social care and the SEND crisis, as well as implementing a long-term, needs-based funding model for road maintenance. Without meaningful action to support local councils properly, we will continue on our journey of managed decline. Thank you.
Dr. Alison Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for introducing this important debate today. I know that improving our roads and highways is a critical mission for this Labour government, and will help to deliver real economic growth for my constituency. In Stoke-on-Trent South, our roads have experienced years of decay under the previous government and are riddled with potholes. With crater-like potholes damaging their cars and congestion delaying commutes to work, this costs my constituents. But this debate is more than just bumps and burst tyres, important as they are. Improving our local road network will greatly boost investment in our city, rural areas and neighbouring regions. That's why I warmly welcome the uplift in highway funding, of which over 9 million has been allocated to Stoke-on-Trent and 19 million to Staffordshire to fix our potholes. The Labour-run Stoke-on-Trent City Council have done excellent work on this already, working with Midlands manufacturer JCB to develop and use the Pothole Pro, a cutting-edge solution to fix potholes which can complete 18 years of traditional work in just over 2 years. And using the Pothole Pro, the Highways Direct Services team in the City Council have delivered real improvements on the city's roads. In the last few years, they have repaired 16,255 potholes, which is a 700% 772% improvement. The City Council have also been using AI to map out the condition of the entire highway network, potholes, cracks and depressions, with a complete inventory of the street signs. And they are hoping to deploy this technology further onto our bin wagons, which of course go everywhere, highlighting the innovative work being done locally to improve our road network. Our road network is strategically critical to the city's and North Staffordshire's prosperity and economic development. The A50 and A500 roads are a key connector between Crewe, Newcastle-under-Lyme, Stoke-on-Trent, Uttoxeter and Derby. Along this corridor are advanced manufacturing companies like JCB, Michelin, Toyota and Bentley, and of course within Stoke-on-Trent we have our excellent ceramics companies like Duchess China and Wedgwood, and I must mention that Stoke-on-Trent is also a specialist in advanced ceramics. Precisely the kind of businesses looking for investment from this Labour government, and precisely the kind of advanced manufacturing companies who can offer real wages and skilled employment to workers in our city and North Staffordshire, and who need good road transport. Unfortunately, my constituents and companies face significant challenges in getting to their workplaces and in freight transport, particularly on the A50 with pinch point roundabouts causing huge delays. A report by Midlands Connect found that commuters are delayed by 37 minutes per day on average due to delays at these roundabouts, and in August I had a crash on one of them and it hurt. This really slows the distance that my constituents can travel for work. Midlands Connect have estimated that improving these roads, along with building more houses and investing in our advanced manufacturing corridor, will generate over 12 billion in gross value added. Our roads are really important, but I must add, as passionate as I am about road improvements, I am equally and more passionate indeed about road safety, and it goes beyond just economic growth and filling potholes. It makes a real difference to road safety for pedestrians in communities across Stoke-on-Trent South, particularly within the rural areas of my constituency, which are under the purview of the Conservative-run Staffordshire County Council. Yeah. Our communities deserve roads where people feel safe, not roads dominated by speeding traffic. In villages like Titchenser and Draycott-in-the-Moors, high-speed roads cut straight through the villages, making it incredibly unsafe for children or for elderly residents to cross the road, to catch buses, to walk to school, or indeed go to doctor's surgeries. Implementing traffic calming measures, pedestrian crossing and introducing lower speed limits are essential steps to making these villages safer and accessible for everyone. In Titchenser, I want to thank Josie Windsor, who has organised a petition to get a pedestrian crossing across the A34 to ensure the elderly, children and working people can access shops and public transport. And I particularly thank Bassett's for their letter of support recently. And thanks too to the villagers of Draycott-in-the-Moors, another village cut in two, this time by the Uttoxeter Road, often used as a rat run when the A50 is congested. There are no pedestrian crossings along the road, and again, like Titchenser, it means that people risk their lives crossing this road to the other side of the village, and it's hugely worrying. And there's even proposals for a huge housing development which is going to add to the problem, and they desperately want a roundabout and pedestrian crossings to ease congestion and improve safety, but they're falling on deaf ears at the County Council at the moment. There are successes. In Western Coyney, my constituent Craig Royce has campaigned successfully to get a pedestrian crossing, a huge win for the local community in Stoke-on-Trent, after his friend tragically lost his life due to a dangerous drive and a lack of a crossing. I am delighted to have helped Craig in his campaign by helping him liaise with relevant professionals at the City Council. And on Hildeston level, along the B5066, I want to thank Penny Meakin for leading the Hildeston Road Speed Campaign for speed controls on Hildeston Road, plus campaigners in Beach also wanting slower traffic. These communities in my constituency are being failed by our current road maintenance system, which is slow and has low consideration for road safety. It moves too slowly and doesn't value the impact on communities, whether local, villages or wider regions, who know their areas better than we do in Westminster and indeed in Staffordshire County Council. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has said that there is no monopoly on good ideas. So let's work with our communities and our fantastic parish councils to deliver the changes our roads desperately need and to build connected and safe communities. Thank you.
Well.
John Lamont.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Roads are crucial to life in the Scottish Borders. They are a lifeline. My constituency stretches from Coburn's Path in the north all the way down to Newcastleton, just north of Carlisle. It takes the best part of 2.5 hours to drive from one end of it to the other. Excluding trunk roads, there are 1,857 miles in the Scottish Borders of local roads that the Council are responsible for. In addition, there are many more miles of trunk roads which the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, is responsible for. Looking around the House, I would challenge any other member, any other honourable or right honourable member, to challenge that figure, that 1,857 miles of local roads that the Council is responsible for. It's a very, very unique and very high figures. Roads are essential for people in the Borders to get around, to see friends, go to school, get to work, go to hospital appointments. It is absolutely crucial that we have good quality roads to just exist, never mind enjoy any of the luxuries in life. And it's not perhaps surprising, therefore, that I receive so much casework from constituents expressing concern about the quality of some of the roads and the lack of investment, which I'll come on to discuss a little bit further. But also when I do surveys, knock on doors each week doing my residents' doorstep surgeries, consistently potholes will be the _1 issue that local residents will raise with me. What I want to mention, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, which I don't think any other honourable or right honourable member has mentioned yet, is I want to pay tribute to the hard-working council employees who do a very, very good job fixing the roads under very difficult circumstances. They might not have the resources that they might need, or all the equipment that they always need, but they are doing the best they possibly can in very challenging circumstances to make the roads as good as they possibly can be. And I know they go above and beyond what is often their job, just to ensure that the roads in the communities that they often live and work live in themselves are maintained to the best possible standards. But what makes their life even more difficult very often is the fact that you have electricity companies or gas companies or broadband companies coming into their communities and digging up the roads. So they might come and fix a road one week and then discover that a few days or a few weeks later there's a utility company coming through digging up the road again. And I think much more needs to be done, both by this UK government and also the Scottish government, which are responsible for this policy area in Scotland, to ensure that these type of utility companies are under a much tougher obligation to reinstate roads back to the standard that they were in prior to their work being carried out, or indeed put them into an even better standard. If they choose to do the work, they need to be investing in the road so it's put into a good standard once they have completed that work. Now, my own council, Scottish Borders Council, like another honourable member earlier mentioned, has invested in the JCB Pothole Pro equipment. Amid growing concerns about the state of the roads in the Borders, they felt that this was a good investment to make. They bought one, they've now had a second one, and this machine has carried out 1,889 road repairs between April and the end of December last year, which has seen a significant improvement in the local road network. There's still a huge backlog of road repairs, thanks largely to the lack of investment by the SNP government, and I'll come on to that shortly. The Council have also set up a new interactive map which allows people to go online to Scottish Borders Council's website. It's a map of the whole council area, and people can identify roads and provide evidence of road repairs, potholes that need to be fixed. Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a consequence of this investment, a recent Freedom of Information request of all councils, all United Kingdom councils, showed that from those that responded, Scottish Borders Council has spent millions of pounds investing in potholes and fixing potholes across the Borders. Between the years 2021 they invested £2.5 million, 2021-22, £3.2 million, in the year 2022-23 it was £3.8 million, totalling over £9.6 million over 3 years, which I want to commend them for this Conservative Control Council, commend them for making this level of investment. But on the other side of the equation, they've had to pay out over £17 million in compensation to road users and car drivers because of damage caused to cars as a consequence of hitting a pothole. So whilst they have achieved a lot in this time, there is much work still to do, and I pay tribute to my Conservative Council colleagues on Scottish Borders Council for what they have done. But my council, like many other councils in Scotland, Scottish Borders Council, are under severe financial pressure because of the SNP government, the Scottish Nationals government in Edinburgh, not investing in local councils, particularly not investing in rural councils like my own in the Borders. Indeed, the Scottish government very often ignores the needs of rural communities across Scotland and invests instead in the Central Belt. Indeed, recently the cuts that the Scottish government have imposed on local authorities, including my own, were described as brutal, savage cuts on local authorities, resulting in many councils, if not all councils across Scotland, having to make very difficult choices between how they invest funding and how they support local and vital services. And I note a few honourable members opposite representing Scottish constituencies. I do think it's very telling that in a debate tonight about road maintenance, some of my Scottish colleagues, SNP colleagues, who represent similarly rural constituencies like my own, are not here to talk about the very challenging road network that they have in their own constituencies, and the fact that they're not here to defend the decisions the Scottish Government are making to cut funding in road investment. And the fact that their benches are empty tonight, I think, says a lot.
Would my honourable friend agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Would my honourable friend agree with me? But it's not just north of the border where these cuts are being made. Here in south of the border in England, we've seen this new Labour government cut the local service delivery grant by over £100 million, which was specifically allocated to rural councils to be able to assist them in providing those much needed services like pothole maintenance or others, where the costs of delivering those services are much higher in rural areas. Does he not agree with me that was the wrong decision of this Labour government to make?
John Lamont.
I do agree, and I think I will develop that point a little bit further. I think my concern is very often policymakers, whether it's here in Westminster or indeed in Edinburgh with the Scottish Government, they have an urban outlook to transport. They assume people have access to the buses and the trains that for those of us living in rural communities we just don't have. So therefore the roads and the use of the car becomes much more important. But I want to go back away. Sorry, yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just 2 points. Of course, I have to point out that Edinburgh is Scotland's lowest funded local authority when you look at the block grant allocation. But in terms of preparing for this debate, I did check to see what the Scottish Government has been saying about the pothole crisis in Scotland, and I found they said absolutely nothing. Has he been able to find anything from them on this issue?
Well, I'm grateful. I think he makes a very valid point. I think my council, Scottish Borders Council, will be very grateful to receive the level of funding which Edinburgh Council receives. But notwithstanding that, I think that there is a problem that the Scottish Government do not invest in roads in the way that we would expect. The Honourable Member will be fully aware of the scandal around the A9 road, which doesn't affect my constituency or indeed his own, but the promises the SNP have made to upgrade that vital road linking the north of Scotland with the rest of Scotland and the rest of the UK for that matter, and the delays and the broken promises have caused huge frustrations to the rural communities that road serves. But my criticism is not only directed at the SNP government, as the honourable members opposite will realise. The Labour government are not immune from criticism either, because the A1 road, the decision by this government to cancel the upgrading, the previous Conservative government had made that commitment, that promise to invest and upgrade the A1 between Morpeth and Ellingham. It's caused great upset, not just in my constituency, but in Northumberland as well. It's a vital road for the local economy in the Scottish Borders. It's also a vital road in Northumberland. It's unfortunate the honourable member for North Northumberland is no longer in his place. But that road supports local jobs, it supports the local economy, and by savagely cutting the funding for that and scrapping that investment to improve that road will undoubtedly cause economic hardship for those communities that rely upon that road. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for allowing an intervention. Does he not agree with me that this is not only inconvenience caused to the many commuters that use the A1 to want better connectivity to north of the border, but indeed all of those landowners that for years now have been moved around in terms of negotiations, and now for the Labour government to stop that funding being allocated for the upgrade to the A1 is not only impacting local businesses in Alnwick, the safety of the crossings with Felton and Ellingham for the like, but indeed those people that own land either side of the A1 that have been put through a huge amount of uncertainty as a result of this Labour government's decision to scrap the funding.
John Lamont.
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. In local press in Northumberland are full of stories of people who are effectively trapped by this. I'm going to come to the honourable member. Somebody's patience. The local press is full of stories of people who are trapped as a consequence of this decision by this Labour government, this choice by this Labour government not to invest in the A1. I'll happily give way to the honourable member to Hexham, who will perhaps explain why he supports the cancelling of the A1 upgrade.
Joe Morris.
At long last. I remind the two gentlemen opposite that Northumberland now has 4 Labour MPs as a result of the neglect and contempt that was held in by the Conservatives under the last government. I would also remind him that his government, in which they served, were very much responsible for misleading people of Northumberland by promising the A1 dualling but not providing any money for it. And is that contempt not purely at the heart of why they lost Northumberland in such spectacular fashion?
John Lamont.
Well, the honourable member for North Northumberland is no longer in his place, but he did make an intervention earlier. The honourable member for North Northumberland was very clear in his election leaflets that he was absolutely committed to the upgrading and the dualling of the A1, a promise which has now been ripped up, and the people of Northumberland, when election day comes next time, I suspect will remember that. That A1 road is absolutely crucial to North Northumberland. It's crucial to my constituents. The road safety on that road is terrible, and that is, forget the economic arguments, the safety arguments make it all the more important. And honourable members may shake their heads all they want. This was a choice that your government, this Labour government, made, a choice that you made after the election, having told the electorate something completely opposite before the election took place. Madam Deputy Speaker, to conclude, I think my concern is that this government and the the SNP government in Edinburgh sadly assumes that everybody either lives in a big city or a big town, and they assume that people have access to cars, to buses or to trains. And for those of us like myself who lives in Coldstream, in my constituency, it's 14 miles to the nearest station. The regular bus, the busy bus, comes every 2 or 3 hours. Unless we have access to a car and a good quality road network, we are stuck. So it is regrettable that this government is not prioritising certainly the A1, which supports my constituency to a certain extent, but more importantly, from my perspective, the Scottish Government, the SNP Government, who I will remind members are not in the chamber today to stand up for their communities who want investment in their roads. It is regrettable the Scottish Government are not investing in the roads and the Scottish borders in the way that they should. Thank you.
Josh Newbury.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Staffordshire has the worst roads in the country. Now, I don't have any definitive proof of that, but it's something that my constituents in Cannock Chase tell me every time I'm out knocking on doors, and I agree with them. As we've heard many times already this evening, the British people are sick and tired of broken roads which are costing them thousands when they hit potholes and making their everyday journeys far more dangerous. Fixing the basic infrastructure that this country relies on is central to national renewal and to improving living standards. I commend the government for their work to ensure that 14 years of pothole-covered roads is coming to an end, with the local authorities set to share in the government's record £1.6 billion of highway maintenance funding, enough to fill 7 million potholes a year. However, my constituents continue to share their concerns with me about dozens and dozens of created roads, like Betty's Lane and Red Lion Lane in my home village of Norton Keynes. Here, short-term fix after short-term fix fail rapidly, meaning residents have to continue to wait for lasting solutions, ultimately leading to higher costs and greater disruption in the long run. Having been a district councillor in my constituency for 6 years, although highways was not part of my remit, a huge chunk of my time was spent on this issue, particularly given that successive Conservative county councillors were all too often missing in action when it came to county council issues in my community. In addition to potholes, blocked drains have been a recurring problem, causing localised flooding and subsequently further damage to the roads and, you guessed it, more potholes. Staffordshire County Council, Conservative run for the last 16 years, has cut back its highways budget so drastically, except of course in the 1 year in the run-up to an election, but for most roads, routine drain clearage is only done once every 3 years. Even completely compacted drains, which are not absorbing a single drop of rain, are frequently ignored, as the outsourced highways contractor, who I will come to in a minute, say that they aren't a priority and will be cleared sometime in the next 3 years. The reality is that this short-sighted approach often leads to localised flooding and further deterioration of the roads, again, a complete false economy. A common complaint from my constituents is with the highways contractor, Amy, the epitome of profit-driven, service-limiting outsourcing if ever I saw one. Frequently they pitch up, having travelled miles from their depot, only to sort one pothole or one drain at a time, leaving others nearby completely ignored, even though addressing multiple issues at once would be far more efficient. I'm sure that honourable members can relate to the frustration that my constituents feel, particularly given that in the face of this dire and costly service, the Conservatives at county buildings in Stafford haven't sought to scrap this contract. They have repeatedly rewarded Amy with extensions. Other councils have switched to a more preventative approach and have had success, whereas in Staffordshire we are still on an endless cycle of patch jobs on the potholes that are deemed the most dangerous. A bit like patching a leaking pipe while ignoring the rest of the plumbing. We need a proper fix for the whole system. I commend the government's action to make sure that councils are accountable for road maintenance and improvements, particularly the news that from the 30th of June this year, councils like Staffordshire County Council will be required to publish detailed reports on how they are spending the £39 million they're getting from the government, how many potholes have been filled and how they're minimising disruptions, alongside gathering input on what works and what doesn't work, something that just hasn't happened in my county for a very long time. Yes, happy to give way to my Staffordshire colleague.
David Williams.
Thank you. And I think it's quite telling that in today's debate we've got about 5 or 6 Staffordshire MPs debating this matter. And I think it speaks, and I wonder whether my honourable friend would agree with me, it speaks about how let down residents in Staffordshire have been for far too long and what happens under a Conservative-led local council.
Hear, hear. Josh Newbury.
Yeah, I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I think it's no coincidence that in Staffordshire we went from no Labour MPs before the election to 9 out of 12, and that so many of us are here today to speak up for our constituents on the areas of frustration for them, but also the failings of our county council and our hope for change in the near future.
Hear, hear.
Roads are critical national infrastructure, and this government must and will undo the neglected state of the previous government that left them in. I welcome the record funding announced, but in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I say to my constituents that we need to make sure this record investment has the maximum benefit for our towns and villages. On the 1st of May, we will go to the polls with a clear choice. Carrying on with a cosy relationship between the County Council and an incompetent highways contractor with the Conservatives, deep cuts to budgets through an Elon Musk-style efficiency drive with Reform, or common sense, good value highway services with Labour. I know the choice I will be making, and I hope my constituents will join me in electing dedicated Labour county councillors who will work with this Labour government to get the potholes fixed.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And after the next speaker, I'm going to impose a 5-minute time limit. Manuela Pertigella.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For residents in Stratford-on-Avon and across the country, road maintenance is one of the most visible signs of how well or how poorly their local area is being looked after. The Local Government Association recently pointed out that the funding allocated for road repairs is falling short of what's needed. In fact, councils are now spending twice as much on repairing local roads as they receive in government funding, and that shortfall is felt on every street in my constituency of Stratford-on-Avon, where dangerous potholes keep reappearing, where road surfaces crack again just a few months after being patched up, and where pavements are on a waiting list of many years to be repaired, especially in our rural villages. In Stratford-on-Avon constituency, we are also seeing the consequences of poor long-term planning by the Conservative-run Warwickshire County Council, which is the local highway authority. Take the Birmingham Road in Stratford-upon-Avon, one of our major arteries in and out of town. Residents and businesses have faced seemingly endless roadworks, which, incidentally, do not improve active travel and safety for pedestrians and cyclists and other road users. There were delays, disruption, exacerbated by emergency and non-emergency road closures by utility companies, resulting in gridlock, children and young people not able to arrive to school on time, and teachers having to act as traffic wardens, residents arriving late for work. The Lib Dem local district councillor, Councillor Lorraine Grocott, has sought answers from the County Council on why these Birmingham road works have taken so long and why these weren't coordinated more effectively in the first place. And I recently hosted meetings with utility companies to address these really serious issues, and I was very disappointed that the Conservative portfolio holder for transport and planning did not come. This isn't just about inconvenience. It's about the impact on small businesses. They lose footfall, they lose money, especially when we have our town gridlocked and there are road closures. It's the impact on the daily life for residents, on carers trying to get to appointments, and on families getting children to school. And what's frustrating is that it's avoidable. Yes, we need local authorities to be properly resourced and funded, but we also need the local authorities to plan better, to coordinate roadworks more effectively, to ensure their contractors do the job well, and to be more responsive to the communities they serve. So let's give our communities the roads, but also the local leadership that they deserve. Thank you.
Yeah.
Terry Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to be able to speak in this important debate today. As I travelled down this morning, I took a moment to appreciate the headline of my local newspaper, the Eastern Daily Press, and as it happens, my local newspaper, but also the local newspaper for the Conservative spokesman, the Honourable Member for Broadland and Fakenham. And it said, Norfolk Council starts work to resurface 320 miles of road. It's almost as if the editor had been reading the order paper for today. And that's significant because today starts the £12 million worth of investment in improving roads in Norfolk. And I'm sure it'll be a well-read article because in Norfolk we are a large rural county, and as such we have extensive road networks. Sadly, far too many of them are in a bad state of repair. That resurfacing of 320 miles this financial year is a very welcome increase on the 280 miles completed last year, and that increase for the coming year is because of the funding awarded to Norfolk County Council by this Labour government, which I am very proud of. And it's a joy to see the member here for Broadland and Fakenham, and I'm sure he just omitted in his speech earlier to thank the Labour government for that significant sum of money for our county, because Norfolk actually received one of the largest sums of money in the entire country for road resurfacing. For the past decade, I've been a Norfolk County Councillor. I was elected in 2013, continuous service up until March this year when I resigned. And during that time, I led for the Labour group on roads, transport and the environment. When I was first elected back in 2013, our highways maintenance backlog sat at around £40 million annually. The most recent figure, from a few weeks ago when I resigned, that had increased to £70 million. A worrying and disappointing statistic, but inevitable given the extensive cuts to local council funding during the past 14 years of Conservative government. Inflation, particularly construction-related inflation, is also a significant contributing factor, and in the last year alone, the repairs backlog in Norfolk has gone up by 20%. And it's particularly difficult in Norfolk because we, as I mentioned, we're a large rural county. We have more than 6,000 miles of road, but especially difficult in my southwest Norfolk constituency, given our routine flooding issues and our soil makeup. Frankly, we're either too sandy or very wet, and that inevitably impacts road integrity as well. Damage and injury due to potholes in Norfolk has also resulted in the County Council paying out almost £120,000 in compensation in the 2023-24 financial year, a total of 228 successful claims. For the year before, there were 150 claims and a total bill of £66,000. So again, further evidence of the worsening problem. And I think it's fair to say that all members here, I'm sure, routinely receive correspondence or comments on the doorsteps about potholes. And that's why I was delighted the government pledged £1.6 billion, which I'm sure will go a long way to addressing potholes in our roads that have been left for far too long. And I note the comments about Staffordshire, and in 2024, the RAC showed that the longest average time to fix individual potholes was in Stoke-on-Trent, followed by Westminster, and actually Norfolk was third, 482 days on average to fix a pothole in my county. Connectivity for my constituents is essential, which is why I'm supportive when the Transport Secretary unveiled £4.8 billion in funding for the National Highways to deliver crucial road schemes and maintain motorways and major A roads, and we were very pleased to welcome the Roads Minister to Norfolk recently. This cash will be getting on with pivotal schemes such as the A47 around Norwich, and also hopefully some of South West Norfolk constituents will benefit from some of the A47 improvements. The government's growth agenda is reliant on not just building, but repairing and fixing the basic infrastructure that this country relies on. It is central to delivering on a national decade of renewal, which will lead to improved living standards, furthering productivity, and securing Britain's economic future through delivering our plan for change. This was the mess that we inherited, and we are getting on with fixing Britain's roads across the country, but also in my home county of Norfolk. Thank you.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Glasgow's longest and straightest road is Great Western Road, or the A82 as it's also known. It begins in the city centre and stretches through the West End and beyond the city boundary. It's the route you're likely to take if travelling to the west coast of Scotland, and it's been dubbed Glasgow's coolest street, an accolade I would strongly support, as a sizeable part of it is either within my constituency of Glasgow West or marks the boundary with Glasgow North. In spite of its importance, like every other road in Glasgow, it's plagued by potholes, and I defy anyone to drive, walk or cycle more than 200 yards along the road its length and not see a pothole. And thanks to the Evening Times, we now know that in 2023, potholes on Great Western Road were responsible for 1,451 reports to the City Council, the highest in Scotland. Of course, at night and in winter, the situation is worse, as you sometimes can't see the potholes or find that they are so deep they retain rainwater and look as though they're a clear stretch of road. Cars are damaged and pedestrians, cyclists and drivers are put at risk. But Great Western Road is not unique. In fact, in the last 2 years in Glasgow, the amount paid out in compensation to drivers has almost doubled, while at the same time, the amount of additional money spent on repairing potholes has decreased by 20%. Now, as we know, the Scottish Government received its largest ever budget settlement in the 26 years of devolution this year. But unfortunately, little of that was passed on to hard-pressed councils. Glasgow alone has lost out on over £400 million since 2014, even although it has been SNP controlled since 2017. It's estimated that the city needs to spend £104 million repairing potholes, with the backlog for Scotland standing at a whopping £2.56 billion. As the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, who's no longer here, mentioned earlier, I know too, as a former councillor, how hard the staff in Glasgow Roads departments work, but they need to be given the resources to do the job. And the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk also mentioned utility companies. And I have a particular bugbear about utility companies, and that is that there doesn't seem to be any way of enforcing or encouraging even them to do a job and do it once and do it well. My own road has been dug up 3 times in the last 2 years by different utility companies. That is surely, in this day and age, something that we could make better for residents and indeed for the utility companies who must be pouring literally money down the holes that they dig. I also would want to draw attention to the situation of the Clyde Tunnel, which is partly in my constituency. As its name suggests, it's a north-south vehicular tunnel that runs underneath the River Clyde. It's a very important road because it connects most of Glasgow, one way or another, to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, amongst other locations. But the Clyde Tunnel is only allocated the same for repair as any other standard stretch of road, which has resulted in an £820,000 shortfall in maintenance every single year, with the result that Glasgow City Council is now thinking about applying a toll to the road, something that I think would be absolutely crazy, frankly, but something that I think they are looking at. They're also considering applying that toll only for those who live outside Glasgow. How you're going to prove that before you go into a tunnel, I really don't know. But the £500 million allocated by this Labour government to alleviate the problem and in England and Wales will, I am sure, make a real difference. And it's therefore to be hoped that the Scottish Government will pay close attention to the actions of this government and learn from it for the good of all Scottish road users, but also to allow our tourism and our economy generally to grow as it should.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Secretary of State for opening the debate. I think it's the most interesting since we debated buses here, actually. It's fantastic. So I'm proud to call Edinburgh my home, and I love that tourists come from all over the world to see the city. However, I'm often ashamed of what they encounter on arrival, particularly the potholes which litter the city, and it feels like particularly in Edinburgh South West. And it's not just Edinburgh. Scotland's roads are in a horrendous state, with over 400,000 potholes reported to local authorities since 2021. The state of our roads, as we heard earlier, is a great visual way of understanding local government finances. What we see in our roads is replicated in our schools and in our social care. And there's particular issues in Edinburgh, as I mentioned earlier. It receives the lowest per capita funding of any council in Scotland. Absolutely shameful for a capital city to be treated in that way. I have to acknowledge, though, that since Labour took control of the city in 2022, we have made real efforts to improve our roads. I spoke to the current transport convener, Councillor Stephen Jenkinson, who happens to be my election agent last year, so thanks to him, who informed me that Edinburgh's independently assessed road condition indicator has improved by 4.5% in the last year, the highest ever improvement in a single year. Of course, this is just a start, and it's what people see when they step out their house that really matters. The maintenance list for the current year was published just last week, pulled together by an excellent council officer called Sean Gilchrist, if we're praising council officers this evening. And I was pleased to see that amongst the 500,000 square metres of roads and footpaths that we resurfaced, there was many that were raised by Edinburgh South West constituents. And I also have to say we have a pothole pro machine, but we call it a pothole killer in Edinburgh, and I think it tops the league table. It's filled 22,000 square metres of potholes. It's been busy. So the UK Government has created a dedicated pothole repair fund for councils south of the border. Currently standing at 1.6 billion, 500 million of that I think is new money. So tens of millions of pounds of money have made their way to Scotland to fill potholes via the Barnett consequentials. This was handed to Scottish Government ministers, but they've set up no similar fund. Instead, they just blame councils for potholes. John Swinney, the First Minister, says that councils have enough money already to fix their roads. despite, as we heard earlier from my colleague from Glasgow South West, the current national backlog being somewhere between £2.5 billion and £3 billion. And it's not just the cost of filling the potholes. Cycling UK estimate that across the UK, one cyclist dies every week due to a pothole. And so the cost of that is immeasurable. So enough is enough. Scotland's pothole crisis can't continue. The SNP government must show some level of ambition, the same level of ambition as the UK government when it comes to potholes. And I'm disappointed there's no SNP members here this evening to answer that. Before I conclude, however, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do want to address something even more important than the state of our roads, and it's not buses, it's the state of our pavements. In many cases, pavement conditions are worse than what we see with our roads, and I was really pleased that the Secretary of State for Transport mentioned pavements in introduction, and I hope that the Shadow Minister does so in his summing up, because I didn't hear him speak in his introduction about it. If we are serious about creating a more active and more equal nation, we must discuss pavement conditions every time we talk about road conditions. There is an easy and low-cost way the government could take. The government could improve our footpaths, give local authorities the power to introduce a pavement parking ban. A complete ban in Edinburgh last year has transformed the city and will lead to better quality pavements over time. I hope towns and cities across England will soon have the same powers. Thank you.
Catherine Atkinson.
Deputy Speaker, according to the RAC, Derbyshire is the area with the most potholes on record in England. The Conservative-run county of Derbyshire had a whopping 90,000 potholes last year, with the next worst area having over 20,000 less. And potholes are not just an issue for motorists, doing damage to their cars and racking up big repair costs. But as the Secretary of State said and was absolutely right, it is also a safety issue for cyclists, for pedestrians, for people using mobility aids or those with vision impairments. Poorly maintained road surfaces can make even heading to the local shops more dangerous than it needs to be. And this government's £1.6 billion investment into potholes means £75 million for the East Midlands Combined County Authority. So Derby and Derbyshire will hugely benefit from this government's funding. But we all know that it's the job of both central government and local government to get the work done. And with Derbyshire County Council having been Conservative-led since 2017, fixing these potholes is just the surface of where the work needs to begin. And on the 1st of May, residents in Derbyshire will have the opportunity to vote for a Labour-run county council who, together with this government, can work to ensure that we see the properly maintained roads that we want. In Derby, we are approaching the 3rd anniversary of the closure of the bridge to Darley Abbey Mills due to disrepair and safety concerns. Darley Abbey Mills is a beautiful UNESCO site with a rich history dating back to the 1700s and is now home to dozens of businesses, from Darley Abbey Wines to Burton Automotive to the West Hill Wedding Venue to Reinvention Fitness. And the closure of the bridge was hugely damaging for businesses and difficult for residents. Now, Derby City Council built a temporary pedestrian bridge in 2022. Which is really important mitigation. And it is functional, but is not reflective of the stunning sight on the Derwent River and is only temporary. And local Labour councillors and I have long been calling for a new permanent bridge, engaging with businesses and residents about it. And now we have seen a massive step forward with the funding allocated by our Labour Mayor for the East Midlands for a feasibility study for the bridge, a key milestone. And replacing the bridge would make such a difference to local businesses and residents. But just a year ago, hope was running out. And it was the election of a mayor who has listened and worked with local councillors and businesses that has brought back hope to this situation. And I think it gives hope to all of us, because everyone will have road infrastructure projects in our constituencies. And I hope that the elections on the 1st of May will bring more Labour councillors to work with Labour mayors and a Labour government to fix our roads and deliver the road infrastructure our communities want to see.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For 14 long years, road users in Bournemouth got a raw deal. Motorists pay their taxes, but they've got little back. Bournemouth and the South West have been left behind and left out, but no longer. The broken roads our Labour government inherited are not only risking lives, they're also costing working families, drivers and businesses hundreds, if not thousands of pounds in avoidable vehicle repairs. Fixing the basic infrastructure this country and our town relies on is central to delivering national renewal, improving living standards and securing Bournemouth's and Britain's future. It's also a question of trust. When I was going around knocking on doors in the 2 years before the election and during the general election itself, people would say to me on the doorstep, "You seem like a nice guy, we want to vote for you, but how do we know that when you go to Parliament you're not going to turn out like the last lot, that you aren't going to deliver on the promises that you keep?" And I can now go onto people's doorsteps and I can talk about the prioritisation of this Labour government in fixing our roads, matching words with deeds, the commitment of significant sums of money in a time of difficult fiscal circumstances, repairing our roads. And not only are we investing in an additional £4.8 billion to deliver vital road schemes and maintain major roads across the country to get Britain moving as part of our plan for change, we are handing councils a record £1.6 billion to repair roads and fill millions of potholes across the country. My own council, BCP Council, has received more than £10 million from the government to fix our roads over the next 12 months. And I spoke with our council leader on the 28th of March to make the point to her that we need to use the money or we lose the money. And she has committed that she has a long list of roads that need fixing, and I'm confident that they will be fixed. The lack of investment to date is a false economy, because when we don't invest in our roads in the first instance, we just store up bigger problems, bigger repair costs. So by investing in our roads now, my hope is that we can actually save the taxpayer more money, as well as make sure that we've got roads that are finally roadworthy. It also saves local councils money. In 2023, BCP Council had to dish out £16,000 in compensation because of the frailty of our roads. But we also need to get some of our fundamentals right. We've heard already in this debate about utility companies, how when we see our roads repaired, utility companies will swan in, they will dig up that road repair, and they will just make the road worse after it. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. We also need to be thinking about our pavements too. I've lost count of the number of elderly ladies that I've spoken with who on their doorstep say they would go into our district centres, they would go into our town centres, but they're too scared of slipping on broken pavements, cracking a hip, and not actually being able to get the hip replacement that they need quickly enough, because they know that the NHS has been ruined under the last Conservative government. Yeah. In the final moments that I've got, I want to commend BCP Council and the council officers for targeting the key roads that need fixing in my constituency. I'm pleased that Cranley Road and Gainsborough Road have had major work completed, and I have called for that on behalf of constituents. I'm pleased to see treatment works completed on Wheaton Road, Abinger Road, Leap Hill Road, Scotter Road and Roberts Road, and again I have called for this on behalf of constituents. I'm pleased to see plans for the resurfacing of sections of Ashley Road as part of the Towns Fund in Boscombe, a much needed investment in that area. And I'm pleased too that we'll be seeing significant works on Holdenhurst Road. And this is particularly important not only to support road users who are households and families, but also to support our tradespeople. When I knock on doors and talk with our small business owners, our tradespeople, they constantly reference the fact that they have their tools stolen and the fact that this can cost them up to £22,730 in repairing or replacing their stolen tools, that the threat of crime is a constant worry, but that their roads just aren't being fixed despite the fact that they pay so much money in taxes. And I want to close just by talking about how road safety isn't only about repairing the potholes in our roads, but it's also about making sure that we've got an investment in pedestrian crossings. So Councillor Sharon Carr-Brown in Queen's Park and Charminster Ward and I have been working to introduce a zebra crossing on Queen's Park Avenue to encourage school children to more easily access that busy street. Currently, the Department for Transport does not permit the use of side road zebras on the public highway. The use of these would allow stretch council budgets to go further in improving access for the public to safely cross the roads. and I've been calling on the Department for Transport to support local council and my own calls for better zebra crossing provision. I'm glad that we're ending the pothole plague. I commend my residents and constituents for calling for improved roads, and I will be continuing to work alongside them to make the case for more funding and better investment in our roads.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under the previous government, it felt too often like being in the passenger seat with no one at the wheel, driving down the road with no sense of direction and hitting bump after bump along the way. And this isn't just a rather overly strained metaphor, but a reality for too many of my constituents. I'm pleased to say, however, that following the success of Labour in winning control of Bracknell Forest Council in 2023, the new Labour administration immediately set to work to address what they felt and what I know to be a huge priority for local residents, setting out a plan to invest £5 million over 4 years. And that includes an extra £1 million in this year's budget over the baseline. And on top of this local investment, I'm proud that the new Labour government has provided a 35% uplift in Bracknell's potholes budget. That's £3.2 million more.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Of course.
I thank my honourable friend and Labour for giving way and for the congratulate him for the excellent speech he is making. Will he agree with me that potholes are a costly, dangerous menace on our roads, and will he welcome the decisive action this government is taking to fill those potholes, which includes in my constituency nearly £12 million?
Absolutely. I'm very, very happy to agree to just that. And the reason why this is so badly needed in Reading and Mid Berks, as well as in Bracknell, is because of the huge backlog in repairs we have inherited from the previous government, as well as resurfacing major and residential roads that have not received the support they need for too long. This investment will also allow for other upgrades, including in Bracknell a new Toucan crossing between Halifax Road and Ranelagh Drive. And using this investment, Bracknell Forest Council is also addressing the pressing need for more parking. It's a massive issue in Bracknell, which has a number of old estates, previously social housing, where there is simply not enough parking for residents. But because we've been putting residents' priorities first, we've delivered more parking on estates under the grass verge conversion scheme. It's slow progress, and there is much, much more to be done, not least because it requires agreement between the local authority and social housing providers. So I would ask the Minister today what more support she can set out, and I know that she's very kindly spoken to me about this issue before. And it is clear that these investments are not job done. There's a huge amount more to do to address the potholes, to address parking. And that's why I welcome the scrutiny set out by the government for annual progress reports, so residents can see the actions we are taking and the local council is taking on their behalf. And from October, a duty to listen to residents' priorities for what work needs to be done and where it needs to happen. And I'm proud to say that I certainly believe that Bracknell Forest Council already does this, so, but it's always welcome that extra focus. I do want to touch on the issue of roadworks caused by utility companies. During the general election, there was a large number of roadworks in Crowthorne in my constituency, so much so that the joke was on the doorstep, how do you leave Crowthorne? You don't. And Crowthorne is a lovely place. I'm very proud to live there, but one does occasionally have to leave. Just this weekend, I have been dealing with a utility company's roadworks down Yorktown Road in Sandhurst. This road has repeatedly seen utilities companies digging it up, and it is really the main road through Sandhurst. One constituent commented on Facebook, "I've worked out that since the start of the year, Yorktown Road has only been free from extremely disruptive roadworks for about 30 days. That's 30 days of the 100 or so we've had this year. So I'd like to ask the Minister what more we can do to make sure that these disruptive roadworks from utilities companies don't repeatedly hit the same stretch of road and, sadly, all too often lead to what was a resurfaced road only last year being left in a terrible state of repairs. In the short time I've got left, I would also just like to touch on another important element of our road network, and that is, of course, buses. I'm really pleased that under this Labour government we've seen a £1 million investment into Bracknell Forest buses. That's more than in the previous 3 years combined. And that's seen massive improvements to our local services, including the 194 bus now serving Bucklers Park in Crowthorne, and it has been able to leave, I'm pleased to say, and the X94 now stopping at Martin's Heron Station with more journeys between Heatherwood and Frimley Park hospitals, connecting our train stations and our hospitals up with our bus network. And the Council's also announced new companion passes for companions of disabled passengers to travel for free. I know that more is coming with the bus services bill so that we can see greater local control over our bus network. Madam Deputy Speaker, with this government, we're back in the driver's seat, back behind the wheel, and I'm proud to say, driving on resurfaced roads. There is more to do, there are more potholes to be filled, but that's this government's plan for change, and it is delivering.
Leingham. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Driving through Stafford has become an absolute nightmare. For years now, we've been in the grip of what can only be described as a plague of roadworks. It's not the odd disruption here or there, but an ongoing onslaught that has affected nearly every part of our town. Now, to be fair, this isn't the first time I've spoken to the House about how poorly residents across Stafford, Eccleshall and the villages have been treated by Staffordshire County Council when it comes to roadworks and maintenance. But I am pleased that today I get to do so at length. Because frankly, the people I represent deserve to have their voices heard, loud and clear. So we now face simultaneous disruption from a litany of roadworks across town. Let me name just a few. Station Road, works here are about to begin. Market Square, another set about to start. Tipping Street, the same story. Radford Bank, which has been a particular concern. Eastgate Street, North Walls, Jailgate Street, Malt Mill Lane, Beaconside, a major artery now reduced to a bottleneck. And then there's Corporation Street, where the disruption is so severe that traffic is rerouting through Cooperative Street, causing real problems for residents. I spoke to a constituent on the doorstep only a few weeks ago who told me they feel like they're stuck in a constant state of dangerous disruption, that their small road has become a permanent rat run, and they're not alone. I did, for a moment when I was writing the speech, consider doing a full list of all the roadworks in Stafford and giving you the date period, a bit like the shipping forecast, but we worked out that it would take the whole debate. Now, whilst it's right that roads are repaired, what I cannot condone is a cavalier attitude towards the needs of residents and businesses, with poor communication and poor engagement, the same roads being dug up or being planned to be dug up on repeat because of a lack of strategic planning between organisations. Staffordshire County Council has received nearly 40 million in funding next year from the local transport authority. Alongside Stoke-on-Trent, it will receive a further 11.6 million in additional cash for fixing potholes and road maintenance. It is this Labour government putting money where its mouth is. It is this Labour government providing funding with money actually there, not promises and unfunded commitments. It is this Labour government handing councils the cash and the certainty that they need. Now it's up to them to get on with the job, put that money to use and prove that they're delivering for their communities. And after years of successive neglect from Conservative governments, it's welcome news to my constituents that there are safeguards in place for this funding, Because if Staffordshire County Council doesn't show how they're improving our roads, they'll risk losing 25% of the funding boost. Staffordshire County Council must now publish reports on their websites by the 30th of June this year, detailing how much they're spending, how many more potholes they have filled, and what percentage of their roads are in what condition, and how they are minimising street works disruption. My constituents in Stafford, Eccleshall and the Villages deserve better than the last Conservative government and the poor communication and treatment they have received from Conservative-led Staffordshire County Council.
Hear, hear, hear.
I want to continue to raise their concerns until we see real change in how these decisions are made, communicated and managed by Staffordshire's Conservative County Council.
Hear.
I call Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak about road maintenance and the importance of safe, accessible roads in Northumberland and in Western Newcastle. Under the previous government, the condition of the county's roads were neglected, ignored, disregarded, which damaged the basic infrastructure and social fabric of my constituency. Now, across the constituency, I'm regularly confronted by roads that have been left in a state of disrepair, from the B6307, I could go through a lot more, but in Hexham, Prudhoe, Acomb, Alnwick, Hepscott, Haltwhistle, and even in smaller villages like Ogle, crumbling surfaces, erosions and deep potholes are rife, and it's one of the things that come back to me every single time I go out on the doorstep, speaking to local people. It's the first thing that people ask me about, typically, is a fault in their local road. For roads that experience heavy traffic, often these are in Northumberland quite small roads that still experience industrial traffic. Potholes can cause real damage, real danger, and it's a disgrace, in my opinion. The safety of residents in my constituency is jeopardised by those poor road surfaces. It can not only place the well-being of residents at risk, it causes considerable damage to vehicles and inflicts expensive repairs on drivers. The road in Newton Village is just one example. It's wide enough to fit one car at a time. It requires cars to regularly pull over. With erosions at the side of the road, drivers regularly experience significant damage to their vehicles and increasing financial burdens as a result. Now, with flooding rampant on that road, the attempted patched repairs by Northumberland County Council are often undone within minutes. Indeed, when I went to visit it with Newton Parish Council, I saw in my own eyes the repair being done, and then within minutes the potholes themselves being flooded. For residents driving to pick up their children from school, young people driving to access employment, constituents getting to the shops or cycling to explore the wonderful landscape that makes North East England the best place in the country to visit, should not have to regularly encounter safety hazards or vehicle damage due to those road services. It's inhibiting access to opportunities throughout the region. And yet, the Conservative administration at Northumberland County Council have taken their eyes off the road. They're failing to communicate timeframes for repairs and failing to improve the condition of local roads. And even where basic repairs have been provided, they've been slapdash. On Wylam Bridge, Lawrence O'Donnell, the Labour candidate for Prudhoe North and Wylam, tells me that the same pothole's been patched 8 times in 12 months. In my view, this means the council is disregarding the basic welfare of residents and is letting families across Northumberland down. And we have the opportunity on the 1st of May to vote that council out. The community should not be neglected due to the Conservative majority on the county council's ignorance of rural affairs, their ignorance of rural life and their contempt for the people of Northumberland. I'm pleased the Labour government has committed additional money to delivering vital road schemes to fix our local roads, and I just would like to, while the minister's here, just echo the calls of my honourable friend from North Northumberland to look at the urgent safety work that can be done on the A1, and this time to make sure that anything that is brought forward is actually properly funded. And in addition to that, I'll also make my own pitch for the A69 to receive similar treatment. It's clear that we're the only party that will prioritise local roads, and it needs a Labour-backed council in Northumberland to make sure that happens. And again, just while the minister's here, there's a few points I'd like to get her attention on. I hope she'll address in her response. I've met with quite a few local farmers recently who have mentioned to me that they want to have EV charging points in their farm shop car parks, but they have real difficulty accessing the grants from DFT to get those charging points because they're told it's only accessible for service stations. Now, the A69 does not have huge amounts of service stations. It would be a great way to boost the local economy, to boost our net zero credentials and to ensure that more people who are going throughout Northumberland can access those farm shops and put more money into the local rural economy. I would just be really grateful if the Minister could look at that and look if there's anything that could be done there. Additionally, just like to mention that it is not just, it's easy to play the kind of hackneyed political game here, but it is not just politicians who benefit from fixing potholes. It is the public, it is the people doing the school run, it is the people on the drive to work, whether that's to Ego, whether that's to Essity, whether that's getting into Newcastle or to Carlisle across my vast constituency, which is the biggest in England. And I'll use my last 15 seconds to talk about visiting Newcastle International Airport and seeing the runway being relayed with tarmac that comes from, I was told, my constituency, and it would be absolutely great to see some of that knowledge, skill and expertise put to use fixing the roads of Northumberland.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So people in Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket must navigate pockmarked and pimpled streets. How depressing, how frustrating. People who are forced to accept a fear of damage or even injury as a precondition of using our roads. People locked in extended battles for compensation with the council and with their insurers. We all know about this problem. Only 36% of local roads in the east of England are in a good structural condition. People talk about the effect of pothole on motorists, and quite rightly, they're dangerous, damaging to cars, and a daily irritant for many of us. However, it's not just car owners who are affected by our roads. So many people know a horror story. It is now no surprise to me, having sat in this debate, that my son, a student at Keele University in Stoke-on-Trent, was involved in a horrendous bicycle crash as he came down a steep hill and went head over heels as his front wheel landed in a pothole. Now, cyclists know all about potholes. Between 2017 and 2023, evidence suggests that one person per week was killed or seriously injured while cycling. So potholes cause deaths. And this is a trend that hasn't shown any sign of abating. Bus drivers and taxi operators can't do their job safely when the roads underneath them simply don't work. And our emergency services can't help us if they're expected to use crumbling roads. Now, I've heard of paramedics whose ambulances have been damaged to the point of being undrivable because of a pothole whilst on the way to a call-out. So better, smoother roads will support our local economies, improve transport, most importantly, limit the number of accidents. So, it's really wonderful to hear the government are at last doing something after more than a decade in which our local roads were simply ignored under the Tories. In Suffolk, the effect of the declining highway spending, down almost 25% last year from 2015, can be seen easily. But that's already changing. Potholes are getting fixed quicker, and that's because our local authorities are getting a much-needed injection of cash from this Labour government. In Suffolk, they're getting an extra £11.7 million this year for that purpose. So, this Labour government is taking this seriously and delivering for the people of Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket. I'm also very glad to see that they're not simply papering over the cracks. They're going to use the latest tech to make sure the public money is spent as effectively as possible on lasting repairs to make sure our roads don't split up again. Brilliant new pothole filling machines and surfacing technologies save us money, and it was really great to hear of the technology advances from the Honourable Member from Stoke-on-Trent South. So, ministers have taken decisive action that the previous government put off for long, and I hope the rest of the House can join me in congratulating them for that.
Yeah. I call Kirstine Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate because the state of our roads is absolutely critical to safe travel, transportation and logistics, and particularly in communities where there is a reliance on the road networks. Now, as a former councillor, I greatly welcome the government's £1.6 billion for road maintenance in England, and I'm sure a few of my colleagues across the chamber tonight who were councillors will agree that there are few topics which flood the mailbox of local politicians more than potholes and the condition of roads. Motorists, cyclists and pedestrians alike have been failed by consecutive Conservative governments, with council budgets slashed to the bone, and their Scottish counterparts are no better. A report from the Local Government Benchmarking Framework found that continued budget pressures on local councils have resulted in a 20% reduction in spending on road maintenance, and we see these budget cuts physically etched into the tarmac across our cities, towns and villages. And as one honourable member spoke of the need to resurface rather than just infill potholes, whilst I think that is absolutely the ideal in many situations, the reality is they just haven't been able to afford to do so, and so they fill in potholes that break up a few months down the line. I recently met with councillors in the Bathgate and Linlithgow constituency to discuss how years of Scottish Government austerity have left our roads in a dire condition. From Bowness through to Bathgate, we see it all over the place. Councillors are frustrated, council staff, hard-working council staff are really frustrated, and local residents are frustrated and angry. Now, seeing the state of local roads and my own experience trying to deliver on road improvements in my former council role highlighted to me how it all comes back to local government funding. And the honourable member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk borrowed a few of the adjectives that I had noted down. In Scotland, we've had 18 years of savage cuts, chronic ring fencing and brutal underfunding of local services by the SNP government. And I know that this... Yes.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and I have huge sympathy with what she's saying about the underfunding and support from the Scottish Government. But would she also sympathise with me? I'm in the London Borough of Havering. We have the Mayor of London. We have the Greater London Authority, and they take huge sums of money from my constituents, yet we don't see much of that money spent in places like Romford. And roads like the A12 and A127, which the Mayor of London through TfL is meant to look after, are often neglected. So there's a common theme about these higher authorities who take money away from our constituents but don't spend it on the people that are paying the costs.
Thank the honourable member for his intervention, but it will be no surprise to him that I cannot agree with him given the years of massive underfunding from his former Conservative governments inflicted upon councils across England. We've had years and years of chronic underfunding of local services. So I do know that this 1.6 billion will be appreciated by councils across England. However, it is yet to be confirmed that the resulting additional funding for Scotland will indeed reach local government. So I wrote to the Deputy First Minister earlier this year to find out when the money would be passed to councils in Scotland. And in the Deputy First Minister's response, she made it clear that it was for the Scottish Government to decide how that additional money would be spent, and that there was no guarantee that it would make it to councils, as the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South also discovered. And as is so often the case with the SNP Scottish Government, funding is passed over from UK governments and it's never heard of again. It's used to plug mismanaged white elephants, fund a new research unit in independence, or finance shadow embassies overseas. Whilst receiving the largest ever budget settlement for Scotland, the Scottish Government has not yet committed to the very basic steps to repair our roads and deliver a safer environment for motorists, cyclists and pedestrians alike. And whilst people across England will benefit from the huge investment of this Labour Government, the SNP Scottish Government must not stand in the way of this Labour Government delivering improved roads for the people of Scotland. Our motorists, cyclists, residents and councils deserve the same commitment and ambition to improving our roads as this Labour Government
is showing in England.
Carl Serena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's nothing more symbolic of broken Britain and the mess we inherited than the state of our pothole-riddled roads. Bumpy, crumbling and unsafe roads have become the norm rather than the exception. For far too long, our infrastructure was allowed to deteriorate. Cash-strapped councils having to prioritise vital services, and the damage has built up year after year, and now it's a problem we're all facing across the country. I was quite flabbergasted when I heard the opposition shadow minister allude to roads being better for motorists in 2024 than they were back 15 years or 20 years. And I would like to invite the shadow minister to actually come and visit Wolverhampton North East, because he would be hard-pressed to find residents who actually shared that view. In Wolverhampton North East, I hear it on the doorstep every time I speak to residents about their priorities and their issues. They're fed up with swerving potholes, angry about how much money they've had to spend on repairs. And let's not forget the rising insurance premiums, a direct result of the number of claims people have to make due to these damaged roads. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, with this government, things are beginning to change. And I welcome the government committing £1.6 billion to local highways maintenance across England. Of that, £500 million will go directly to fixing 7 million potholes. That's a huge step forward, but because of the dire state of the roads, this is just the beginning. For Wolverhampton, this will support £9.7 million in funding for this financial year, a significant investment. But our roads are in such poor condition that a single investment won't fix everything overnight. The problem is years in the making and will take time to repair the damage caused by years of neglect. There isn't a quick fix here, so I welcome a strategic programme to improve roads across Wolverhampton, resurfacing, surface dressing and preventative treatments that will last. To everyone who's reached out to me, thank you, because your frustrations are justified. We know there's more to do and we can't fix every road overnight, but after years of frustration with this record investment, cash-strapped councils can finally get on with the job.
Kevin Bonavere.
Deputy Speaker, I'm glad to have this opportunity today to address a problem that comes up in almost every street when I'm out door knocking in Stevenage and our villages. The problem being ever more potholes and the general disrepair of our roads. When I made a point to someone recently about the importance of tackling potholes, they dismissed it as a trivial matter. I happen to think it's actually very serious. It's very serious when a parent of a low-income family, just about getting by, tells me that the pothole they reported at a Conservative county council time and time again hadn't been fixed and eventually ended up costing hundreds of pounds of damage to her vehicle. Paying for that simply isn't an option, so the family has to take significant time out of their week to make a claim. Or the young teacher on her bike, which hit a pothole causing her to tumble over, sustained serious injuries and missed school for several weeks. The worst thing is, this should all be preventable. Statistics from the online retailer blackcircles.com show that Hertfordshire had the highest average payout for pothole-related claims in the UK, with an average of £367 per claim in 2023. This amount is significantly higher than the national average of £261 per claim. And I can tell you why this is. Our Conservative-run county council in Hertfordshire has totally failed on road repairs, leaving our roads in Stevenage and the villages of Nebworth, Codicott, Datchworth and Aston in a state of total disrepair. And I think the first reason that they have failed is bottom-up. Conservative councillors generally aren't proactive in our community, so council officers and the highways team aren't getting the quality of reporting on where issues are and what the priorities should be from the ground up. The second issue is top down. 14 years of funding cuts from successive Conservative governments to local councils in an era of austerity, cheerled by Conservative county councillors in Hertfordshire, while their budgets declined and outcomes got worse. Stevenage Conservatives recently claimed that Hertfordshire was the best-run county council in the country. I gently suggest that when 14 years of austerity devastate a council's budget and local Conservatives are in charge of allocating what's left, you end up with a council ranked by the Times newspaper last year as the 172nd best performing in the country, with very little left for road repairs. And now, believe it or not, there's a third issue, and this is the existential one. The Conservative Cabinet member for Highways at Hertfordshire County Council, also a Stevenage councillor, doesn't even understand what a pothole even is. In 2023, he proudly claimed that outstanding road repairs in Hertfordshire were lower than the national average, with only 4% of B and C roads requiring outstanding repairs compared to 6% nationally. That all sounds fairly positive, until you realise that we are not comparing like for like. Hertfordshire classifies a pothole as being at least 300mm wide and 50mm deep. When just next door in Essex, they only have to be 100mm across, or further away in Trafford, just 40mm deep. So you think you just hit a pothole in Hertfordshire? Well, it must be your imagination, says the council. All the while, they'd rather change the definition of a pothole or wait for people to claim for damages, costing the council more than it would to fix them for the future in the first place. Thankfully, we are turning a corner. This new Labour government is on the side of road users in their cars, on the buses and on their bicycles. And it takes the issue of fixing potholes as seriously as residents expect them to. And that's why our county has received £9.3 million for road repairs to fix as many potholes as possible. A market change from 14 years of Tory austerity. But while this extra funding is welcome, the public deserves to know how their councils will use that funding to improve their local roads, which I'm pleased the government is requiring them to show progress or risk losing 25% of the funding boost. So now the question on all my residents' lips: can we really trust a failing Conservative-run Hertfordshire County Council and the unseen, unbothered Conservative county councillors to use this money properly? We now have a new Labour government facilitating change through these measures, but we also need effective councillors to deliver that change in every street, community, town and village across Hertfordshire and the wider country. Where councillors like those in Tory-run Hertfordshire fail to deliver that change, our residents can and should choose new ones who can.
I can't leave picture.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I could walk 500 miles, Madam Deputy Speaker, and then walk 500 more, it would be a miracle, particularly after all this bobbing, but I'd have also walked the full length of the road network of Doncaster. Unfortunately, due to the pothole crisis facing this and every other authority in our country, the chances are I would have tripped over on one and fallen down long before I got to anyone's door. Such is the state of the roads in Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme, and the amount of potholes that I've reported over the last few years and had repaired, that I'm also called on social media pothole picture. But of course this is no joke, and it's a very real issue that affects people's lives. As in the example of the Lister family in Hatfield in my constituency. On his 18th birthday, Josh was driving down an avenue and hit a huge pothole, which ripped through the side of his tyre, shot him into the curb, leaving the relatively newly passed driver not only in a degree of shock, but fearful of driving ever again. He had a birthday, an 18th birthday, that he will never forget, but for all the wrong reasons. Just 2 months later, his mum Gemma fell over a pothole on a footpath, causing her to sustain a really very serious injury to her arms, to her hands and to her knees, impacting her for many months thereafter. So potholes are not just a trivial matter. They are indeed hugely serious and ruin lives. Like most places, Doncaster and Axholme's roads and their networks are one of their most precious, but they're one of their most expensive assets. And between the more volatile weather, increased traffic and physical heavier vehicles, the cost of maintaining those assets has risen at the same time that the council's budget for dealing with it has been cut by half by the previous government. So now there is a repair backlog sitting at the hundreds of millions in Doncaster alone, and we have a council fighting tooth and nail just to keep it at that while trying to resolve the pothole crisis. Thankfully, this government has recognised the importance of tackling this. It has increased the funding to local authorities with 2.3 million for North Lincolnshire and 6.7 million for South Yorkshire. We are finally giving mayors like Ros Jones and the councils who know their area, who know where to invest, the tools that they need to start not just to fight to stand still, but really to make improvements. And this is just the beginning. Of course I'll give way.
The Honourable mentioned we're finally giving tools to mayors. Well, surely he would agree it's better to give funding directly to local councils to spend on their local communities. If you give it to a wider mayor, it gets spent in areas where the mayor has priorities, but it doesn't necessarily go to where the constituents that we represent need the money spent.
Thank you for that intervention. I did actually refer specifically to Mayor Ros Jones, who is the leader of the council. She's just called a mayor in that situation, who knows that area specifically in Doncaster. But of course, the devolved mayors also know their area particularly well and work with their area and their constituency to ensure that the money goes to the right places at the right time. Our councils have been crying out for 14 years for help. And I'm really pleased to say now that Westminster is finally listening. Westminster is listening to the Lister family, who I've mentioned. They are listening to our constituents, and they are listening to all of the local authorities who don't so desperately need this money to invest. And Madam Deputy Speaker, as such, I'm almost ready to relinquish the title of pothole pitcher, but I will be focusing on pavements as well in the future. Thank you.
Emma Foodie. Madam Deputy Speaker, in Cramlington and Kilnworth, like so many of the other constituencies we've heard about today, potholes are not just an inconvenience, they are a danger. They damage vehicles, put cyclists and pedestrians at risk, and cost working people hundreds, if not thousands of pounds for repairs. For carers on their rounds, for parents on the school run, and for small businesses making deliveries, this problem disrupts daily life and it chips away at local confidence. And this did not happen by accident. Take North Tyneside Council, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the last acts of the previous Conservative administration in North Tyneside was to outsource road maintenance to Capita back in 2013 on a 15-year contract. A 15-year contract of poor service and inadequate outcomes. And during the election last year and every week when I am knocking doors, the number of people who share their frustration of potholes in our local area, like residents in Shiremoor on Angerton Avenue who shared how they would report the potholes, how Capita would come out and would gaslight residents on whether the pothole existed and why they would tell them why they wouldn't be repaired. The pothole wasn't wide enough, the pothole wasn't deep enough, often arguing for long periods of time whilst more were appearing like a frustrating game of whack-a-mole. And that is the legacy of failure in North Tyneside of the last Conservative administration, the one they left behind and which we can never risk happening again. But when we talk about legacies of Conservative failure, Madam Deputy Speaker, we can look no further than the Conservative-run Northumberland County Council. And I found it extraordinary the number of members on the opposite benches who wanted to associate themselves with Northumberland County Council. Because under the Conservatives in Northumberland, we have seen staggering levels of negligence. We are now the county with the highest number of potholes in the entire, with the third highest, I beg your pardon, in the entire country. Recent research showing that 449 successful claims for compensation were made due to pothole damage to the county council. And one might ask themselves, is that on a par with the councils in the area? No, it comes out higher, not just than all the individual local authorities within the North East Combined Authority, not just all of those councils put together, but more than 4 times the level of all of those councils put together in terms of successful claims that have been made of the county council. More than £250,000 in payout. £250,000 of taxpayers' money that could have been far better spent. It is truly staggering when the county council could have avoided all that by adequately maintaining our roads. The Conservatives have had their chance to fix it and they have failed. The roads are broken and so is their credibility, be it locally or nationally. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the good news is that help is now coming from the Labour government. Our plan for change is delivering real results, and from this month, councils will receive their share of £1.6 billion in new funding to repair and maintain our roads. The North East Combined Authority, led by Labour Mayor Kim McGuinness, will receive over £21 million to tackle the issue head-on. And this is not about press releases or photo opportunities. It is about fixing the basics the communities rely on. Fewer parents dreading the school run, fewer workers stuck in traffic caused by roadworks, and fewer elderly residents fearing a fall because of uneven payments. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are not just filling in the holes, we are laying the foundations for the future. And Labour is delivering a £4.8 billion investment in major road schemes, preventative maintenance and long-term infrastructure renewal, meaning fewer potholes, safer roads and more confidence in our transport system. That's what governing seriously looks like. Fixing the basics, supporting local economies and making life better for ordinary people. The people of Cramlington and Killingworth have waited long enough. Labour's delivering the investment, the oversight, the plan. Now it's time for councils to act and for the Conservatives to explain why they ever let things get so bad. Thank you.
David Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When constituents talk to me about what matters most in their day-to-day lives, roads come up time and again. Whether it's travelling to work, doing a school run, or getting to vital medical appointments, the state of our roads affects people's quality of life. And when those roads are full of potholes and defects, when they damage vehicles and put cyclists and bikers at risk, it sends a clear message to residents: you've been forgotten. That's exactly how too many people feel in Kidsgrove, Tork, Butt Lane, Newchapel, Harrisey Head and Malcop. And today I want to speak up for them. Staffordshire County Council last year launched its Highway Recovery Plan. But for many of my constituents in Kidsgrove and the surrounding area, it still feels like they're waiting for it to even start. Residents are telling me the same time and again. We report defects, we chase them up, but nothing gets done. Roads like Gloucester Road, Newchapel Road, Kidsgrove Bank, they remain in a shocking condition. Vehicles are being damaged, and people, quite rightly, are at their wits' end. And it feels as though Kidsgrove is being treated like the poor relative, left behind while other areas move forward. Roundabouts in places like Tork Pits by the Old Normid look unloved and neglected. Some older and disabled people tell me they fear leaving their own homes because of how unsafe the pavements really are. For example, on Chester Road in Tork, residents have to walk into the road as a broken pavement has been fenced off by the Conservative-led council for over 4 years. Let me be clear, Conservative-led Staffordshire County Council is failing Kidsgrove, and that is not okay. However, just over the border in Stoke-on-Trent, we've seen a very different story. Since Labour took control of the council 2 years ago, the city has delivered a marked step change in how we deal with potholes. The new administration made road repairs a clear priority, and the response speaks volumes. Back in 2023, around 7,500 defects were repaired. A year later, that figure rose to over 13,000, a 76% increase in just 1 year under a Labour council. When they pledged to fix 6,000 defects in 6 months, they didn't only do it and meet the target, they beat it, delivering 6,500 repairs in 4 months. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is the difference a Labour council makes. Yeah. Under the leadership of Jane Ashworth, Stoke-on-Trent City Council has also increased its own capital investment in highways by more than 10% this past year, despite the financial pressures facing councils up and down the country. Because they know that people of Stoke-on-Trent deserve better than the crumbling roads we inherited by the previous Conservative administration. This Labour government is now stepping up to help, fixing the mess 14 years have left behind. Stoke-on-Trent will receive over £9 million of funding, Staffordshire County Council more than £19 million in new government transport funding. And it's vital we see the results of this in Kidsgrove. Now, let's not forget that back in 2022, the people of Kidsgrove put their belief in Conservative county councillors, believing there'll be strong voices for our area. But sadly, those councillors appeared to have gone AWOL, leaving the residents behind. Residents in Kidsgrove deserve better than this. They deserve to know their voices are being heard and that the money is there to put things right. I welcome the extra funding for both Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, but this can not only be about money alone, it must be about delivery. And as we've seen in Stoke-on-Trent, and indeed across the country, where the Conservatives fail to deliver, Labour steps up to pick up the pieces and gets to work. I hope the residents of Kidsgrove and the Talk and Red Street divisions will remember this as we approach the County Council elections next month. And I do say to ministers and the Secretary of State, keep backing innovative councils that get the basics right, like the Labour-led Stoke-on-Trent City Council. Every journey matters, and Kidsgrove should never, ever again be treated like the poor relative. And for as long as I'm the MP for Stoke-on-Trent North and Kidsgrove, I'll continue to stand up for my local residents.
Alison Hugh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby, the views take your breath away. Sadly, so do the potholes when your car hits one, and not just when it happens, but when you get the repair bill. According to the RAC, the cost of pothole damage to vehicles is around £600 on average, with more severe repairs costing considerably more. Madam Deputy Speaker, potholes don't just damage cars, they damage people. One constituent told me that when his disabled father is driven to the doctors or to hospital appointments, it's almost inevitable that they hit a pothole on the way, which causes him pain. Another Scarborough constituent told me that the journey she needed to take to York Hospital to attend the pain clinic was too painful due to the quality of the roads, and therefore she stopped making it, despite being in a huge amount of pain. The Conservative-run North Yorkshire Council say that keeping our roads in the best condition for the money they have is one of the biggest challenges that they face, which is why it's brilliant that the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority will soon be receiving their share of the Labour government's record £1.6 billion road maintenance funding. This is the biggest one-off road maintenance funding settlement councils have ever been given. For Mayor Scaith in York and North Yorkshire, it's £62.1 million, an increase of £16.6 million. And of course, I've spoken to the Mayor about the importance of ensuring the quality of repairs in my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby. Maple Drive in Scarborough is home to Northstead Community Primary School. A very busy road, it is littered with potholes, which are regularly reported to the council using their online tool. Workmen duly arrive to fill the potholes, but my constituents report the potholes soon reappear, bigger than before, leaving Maple Drive looking like a patchwork quilt, but it has to be said, not a particularly attractive one. It's vital that we abandon the patch and run approach and focus on permanent and innovative repairs, especially given the cold and increasingly wet winters we encounter on the coast. I welcome the caveat attached to the money, which means the Combined Authority will need to publish annual progress reports and prove to the public that the work is being done to a high standard. After years of Conservative neglect, thanks to this Labour government, drivers in Scarborough, Whitby and the villages can look forward to smoother, safer local roads.
Hear, hear.
With leave of the House, I call Shadow Minister Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, it's been a very interesting debate, and one might be forgiven for thinking that there are local elections coming up. I don't know what caused me to think that, but there was something in the air. Let's leave it at that. I'm not going to go through everyone's contribution, insightful and interesting as each of them were in their own way, but I will just pick out a few highlights of the debate. I'm going to start with my honourable friend, the member for Keighley and Ilkley, who, rather in the theme that I developed earlier on, referred to the terrible performance of Bradfield Council on potholes, and that this was leading to a loss of trust in Labour. And in particular, he referenced the residents of Ilkley who had gone to the trouble of having a referendum on what they should do about the state of the roads, and the council proposal to impose speed humps and a 20 mph limit. And despite 98.3% of residents voting against that, they were ignored by Labour. And then you go on to the honourable member for Burnley, who is in his place. And he, again, raised the condition of his local roads. But then he went on to make an interesting point, because he complained of what he described as the levelling up crumbs. I took advantage of the length of this debate to actually look up what those levelling up crumbs were. And in fact, that was £19.9 million that was directed to Burnley itself, 3 town centre schemes. That was money that was achieved by the excellent former colleague of mine, Anthony Higginbotham, who was understated but an amazingly effective Member of Parliament. And I will follow the current member for Burnley and his career closely to see whether he delivers even a fraction of that for the people of Burnley. And then there was the contribution of my honourable friend, the member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. And he showed off about the length of his roads. Certainly puts my roads to shame. But he was another advocate of the JCP Pothole Pro. He said that 1,889 repairs have been undertaken in 6 months. But what he really, I will in a second, but what he really exposed was the repeated failure of the SNP, who have cut funding north of the border, and the lack of interest that the SNP and their members in this place have showed in this debate, but with the emptiness of their benches, and I will give way. I will give way.
Making a gallant effort to rattle through all of the fantastic contributions we've had tonight. I wonder if you can take this opportunity just to congratulate Bracknell Forest Council and its Labour administration for the £5 million investment over 4 years in pothole repairs.
You commend any council that gets on top of their potholes of whatever colour. I'm about improving the quality of life of the residents of this United Kingdom, and I make no bones about it. If Bracknell Council are improving the potholes in their neck of the woods, that is great, but it's also the same about Conservative-led councils as well. So in his exposure of the failure of the SNP, the honourable member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk was joined by the honourable members for Glasgow West and also for Edinburgh South West. And they agreed that the SNP are failing the people of Scotland. And I will take this opportunity, as I was asked by the honourable member for Edinburgh South West, to highlight the need for wheelchair access on pavements, and that is a very important consideration. I'm not sure he is in his seat. And then I move to the member for Bournemouth East, who made a speech which reinforced the reputation he's already earned in this House. And then there were contributions from Stafford and Hexham and Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket. And then we move to the honourable member for Bathgate and Linlithgow, who I should have mentioned earlier was also blaming the SNP for their failure of motorists. But I take this opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Romford, who made an expert intervention levering in reference to Romford on a speech which was entirely about Scottish issues. And I've learned a lesson, an important lesson there, which is that he gained the maximum impact for the minimum amount of time in the chamber. And if only the rest of us had followed his advice. And then there were contributions from Wolverhampton North East, Stevenage, and finally, penultimately on this list, the honourable member for Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme, who referred to the power of mayors. And this gives me an opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, to make a shameless plug for the Conservative candidate for the Mayor of Doncaster and former colleague of mine and very good friend of mine, Nick Fletcher, who will be the best leader for Doncaster. And then we come to the further contributions from Camington and Killingworth, Stoke-on-Trent North. We all miss Jonathan Gullis in this place. And then finally Scarborough and Whitby. So I opened this debate for the opposition with the key issue of the need for predictable long-term funding. And there's a quote I wish to draw to your attention, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's this. The British people are bored of seeing their politicians aimlessly pointing at potholes with no real plan to fix them. That is a quote not from myself, but from the Prime Minister. And he was right. He identified the problem, but he's then gone on to make it worse. Because I'd love to be corrected by this, but I would give the Minister who's going to wind up after me the opportunity to confirm the calculations of the Local Government Association yesterday that calculated that the actions of the government and their national insurance contribution tax grab from local authorities will reduce their ability to fund roads and other important issues by 1.1 billion. Does she agree with the Local Government Association, which is of course an independent organisation, or does she not? And secondly, could she confirm that vehicle excise duty has been increased by this government to the tune of £1.7 billion over the next 5 years during the course of this government? And does that dwarf the funding which has so far been announced for road improvements by Labour? It's not too late, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government could admit that they were wrong to shorten the time frame of investment in road infrastructure. They could today commit to a 10-year funding plan. They could take this opportunity to reassure local authorities about how their funding is going to be received, allowing them to increase efficiency of their pothole repair programmes. They could take this opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, to deliver the long-term funding our road networks needs. And I look forward to the imminent announcement from the Minister.
I call Minister Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is absolutely clear that local roads maintenance is an issue that affects every one of us and one that our constituents care about very deeply, and I'm grateful to all the honourable members who've spoken up on behalf of their constituents. I can assure them that this government gets it. It is absolutely determined to do something about it. There are too many contributions for me to mention all of them, but my many honourable members, including my honourable friend for Dunstable and Leighton Buzzard, highlighted why it's important that local councils are required to publish reports on their plans. We want people to know if their local council is choosing not to spend the extra funding that we're providing on fixing their cratered potholed, pimpled roads, and I'd like to assure her and other members of the Transport Select Committee that work is already underway on a complete review of the guidance, the Code of Practice on well-managed highway infrastructure, to give it its full name. I'm really pleased that my honourable friends for Stoke-on-Trent North and South highlighted the innovation that's being adopted by Stoke-on-Trent's Labour Council and their Highways Department, investing in AI to properly understand and monitor their road network and using the Pothole Pro to undertake long-lasting repairs. And I'm really sorry to hear that Conservative Staffordshire County Council isn't as responsive to the concerns of her constituents who are calling, for investment in road safety. But as honourable members for Stafford and Cannock Chase rightly reminded us, Staffordshire residents can do something about this problem by voting Labour on the 1st of May, as can residents in Derbyshire, in Northumberland, in Hertfordshire, Lancashire and many other parts of the country. I'm grateful to Scottish colleagues for their contributions. It's disappointing to hear that the SNP government is not acting to tackle the state of Scotland's roads, as this government is in England and my Labour colleagues are in Wales. The Scottish people deserve better. My honourable friend for Edinburgh South West raised the important issue of pavement parking, as did others, and he's right to do so, because we know that it contributes to our broken pavements, which are so unsafe for many elderly and disabled people. The previous government promised action for almost a decade and did nothing. We plan to respond to the 2020 consultation and set out our policy in this area. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I tell people that I'm the Roads Minister, I can pretty much guarantee that the first question they're going to ask is, what are you doing to fix my street? And it's not surprising that this issue is so often raised with us when we're out and about in our constituencies. The appalling state of our local roads and pavements is something that is all too visible for us every single day. And as we've heard time and time in this debate, it's unsafe for pedestrians and cyclists and bikers. It makes motorists' lives a misery, and it's holding back economic growth. The Shadow Minister suggested that things were worse in 2006 than under his government, but according to the RAC Pothole Index, drivers were nearly 40% more likely to have a pothole-related breakdown in 2024 than they were under the last Labour government. Not right now, as he's already had the opportunity on this issue.
Oh, Jerome, you've actually goes. It's not going to get better.
Point of order, Jerome Mayhew.
I'm grateful for that, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could you give me some advice where the Minister has misquoted me and has refused the opportunity to give way so that her record can be corrected? What steps can I take to correct the record?
I thank the honourable member for his point of order. I think that is a matter of debate and it is now on the record. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Secretary of State said earlier, this government inherited crumbling roads with local highway authorities struggling to stay on top of an ever-increasing backlog of maintenance. Now, of course, there are many reasons for this, including the weather and the increasing volume and weight of traffic using our roads, but it's also abundantly clear that the funding provided by the previous government was simply not enough to allow local authorities to deal with the problem. No one knows this better than Karen Shaw, our Labour candidate in Runcorn and Helsby, who served for many years as Cabinet Member for Highways on her local council. As she and we remember, for 14 years the Tories made promises, but in reality any funding uplifts were short-lived and never fully materialised. It's perhaps not surprising that the benches opposite have been so empty during this debate. Now, this government is determined to ensure that under this government things will be different and we will do better. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Minister, I just wondered whether she knew whether any Reform MPs had constituents with pothole issues. Of course, we wouldn't know because they aren't here.
Well, my honourable friend makes a very important point, and people can see for themselves which party is on the side of motorists and road users. For the current financial year, we've provided an extra £500 million. That's on top of the previous government's funding baseline and the Network North money for 2024-25. It's a huge increase. For most authorities, it means around 36 or 37% more than last year, and of course it is just a start. As many honourable members have observed today, a one-off uplift won't fix all of the problems. It was never going to. We are determined, however, through the spending review to secure a long-term funding settlement for local highway authorities to allow them to plan ahead with confidence. Strangely, the only time the previous government promised long-term funding was 9 months before the general election, knowing full well they had not put any cash aside to pay for it. We are determined to ensure that the extra funding we are providing genuinely leads to extra spending by local authorities rather than simply allowing them to put less of their own funding into highway maintenance. That's exactly why we're introducing the extra reporting requirements that the Secretary of State set out. The information that councils publish in June will shine a spotlight on this in a way that's not happened before. It will allow local people to see for themselves what repairs and resurfacing their council is planning and how this compares to other local authorities. It will help the department in a moment and the public to understand matters such as which authorities are putting their own funding into the pot and which are doing the most to prepare their networks for the wetter winters that we are already seeing. I give way.
Minister for giving way, and I welcome the announcement to do better transparency on how local government is spending money on potholes. But the challenge that I have across the Bradford district is, from a Freedom of Information request, only 4% of highway spending was spent in a 6-year period within the Keighley and Ilkley constituency. The vast majority of the highway spending being spent within Bradford city centre. So how will the government ensure that across a local authority area there is a fairness in the amount of highway spending that is allocated across the whole district rather than just on city centre projects?
Well, this government believes in devolution. It is for local councils elected by local people to decide their own priorities. Now, I know that we've spent a lot of time talking about potholes this evening, and despite all the attention they get and the headlines that they generate, potholes are only a small part of what local highways authorities are dealing with. They have to look after complex networks of pavements, cycle lanes, bridges, tunnels, lighting columns, drainage channels, culverts, retaining walls, and much else besides. They're just the tip of a very large iceberg, but they are the thing that's most visible to road users, whether they're in a car, on a bike, or being jarred while sitting on a bus. So, yes, we are asking local authorities to give us their best estimate of the number of potholes they've filled in recent years, but we also want them to tell us what they're doing to shift their focus to long-term preventative maintenance, because avoiding potholes forming in the first place is, as the Public Accounts Committee recognised, generally much better value for money than temporarily patching the same pothole again and again once it's become a safety-critical problem. Now, let me just move on to street works and what we're doing to respond to the complaints that our roads often seem to be dug up again and again by utility companies in an uncoordinated way. It's the responsibility of the Highway Authority to coordinate any works taking place on its road. The Honourable Member for Stratford-upon-Avon rightly described the cost of failing to do so for local people and for local businesses. We're committed to ensuring that the proper policy framework is in place to enable authorities to coordinate and plan road and street works effectively. My honourable friends for Bracknell and Stafford will be pleased to hear that we've recently announced that we will be doing more to hold utilities to account for disruptive works. We'll be doubling fixed penalty notices to increase the level of deterrence they provide and to improve compliance. Charges will now also be applied at weekends and on bank holidays to reduce congestion and disruption during these times. Lane rental can help highway authorities reduce the impact of works taking place on the busiest roads at the busiest times, and schemes allow authorities to charge utilities up to £2,500 per day for works on those roads, encouraging companies to work smarter. We know that many more councils are developing lane rental schemes, and we plan to update our guidance to help them to develop those schemes. And we've announced changes that mean that highway authorities will be required to spend at least 50% of surplus funds raised from lane rental on roads maintenance. Madam Deputy Speaker, to conclude, I'd like to repeat my thanks to all of those honourable members who've contributed to what's been a very rich and positive debate this evening. We all want to see an improvement to the state of our local roads, pavements and other parts of our highways networks. I doubt that this will be the last time we discuss potholes, but this government is determined to give local authorities the tools and the resources that they need to get on top of the problem. We want local councils to be more transparent about what they're doing with taxpayers' money, and we want them to follow best practice. We want councils to learn from each other and benchmark each other's performance so that the overall standard of delivery is driven up. Getting on top of the backlog in local highway maintenance is a high priority for this government. We recognise there are tough choices for councils here, but getting more potholes fixed was a manifesto commitment and one we are determined to deliver. We've hit the ground running, but I know there's a lot more still to do. And we'll say more in a few months' time about the longer-term funding outlook for all local authorities. We look forward to working with councils over the months ahead to ensure that our funding uplift is making a real difference to all our constituents. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered road maintenance. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to motion number 3 relating to the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee. Mark Tarmy. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Michael Payne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in this evening's debate. May I also thank my honourable friend, the Minister, for being here to respond to this evening's debate. As my constituency neighbour, I know he's equally as passionate about Nottingham, Nottinghamshire and the East Midlands as I am. I refer members, Madam Deputy Speaker, to my register of interest regarding my unpaid membership of 2 local authorities. Madam Deputy Speaker, ahead of important local elections across the East Midlands, I am grateful to have this opportunity to lay out the importance of councils to our economy. Growth is this government's #1 priority. It is what will pay for our public services, it is what will pay for our social security, from the state pension to universal credit, and it is what will pay for our national defence. The government is right to focus on growth. Under the last government, Madam Deputy Speaker, we suffered a lost decade. Growth flat, incomes flat, opportunity flat, and the East Midlands suffered as a result. The gap in growth between where we should have been to where we are is billions of pounds that could have been spent on essential public services. The East Midlands has been at the forefront of this decline as a result of Conservative mismanagement. Our economy in the East Midlands used to be strong, but deindustrialisation, a lack of investment and regional disparities in public spending have left us lagging behind other parts of the United Kingdom. The Midlands, Madam Deputy Speaker, was the industrial heartland of this nation. We have so much potential. We are the regions most connected to the entire of the UK, a distinctive mix of engineering, manufacturing, construction and sciences. But now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we struggle to find the jobs, the transport and the opportunity that we had before. A lot of this comes from lack of investment, including investment in our local councils. The East Midlands, Madam Deputy Speaker, receives the lowest level of spending per person across the United Kingdom. We receive the lowest level of capital spending and we receive the lowest level of total spending. Madam Deputy Speaker, the facts speak for themselves. Over the last 14 years, the East Midlands was levelled down by the Conservative Party. That inequity leaves us billions short for our local government, our public services and our infrastructure investment. Of course I'll give away.
First of all, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Gedling for bringing this forward? And he's right to highlight the issues of what's necessary. But the Honourable Member is also right to highlight that the Growth Commission set up by the Mayor is key to that investment, and also making the most of the free port that the East Midlands enjoys, that the Chancellor announced just a few weeks ago, gives you some hope and vision for the future, and I think that's really important to underline the possibilities that there are for the future. Incidentally, a free port that with great respect, that the Conservative Party promised us in Northern Ireland and just failed to deliver. So does the Honourable Member not agree that it would be great if the current government would designate a free port for Northern Ireland that is essential? And just like the East Midlands, government support is an essential component for economic growth, which sows into the wealth of all this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Thank you so much.
I thank the Honourable Member for Strangford, and I think he's right to pay testament to the Chancellor and also to the Labour Mayor, Claire Ward in the East Midlands, unlocking nearly £1 billion in growth and investment from the Freeport at East Midlands Airport. And he knows Northern Irish politics far better than I do, so I think the Treasury benches will have been listening very closely to his powerful argument tonight on behalf of his constituents, and I wish him well with his campaign. Madam Deputy Speaker, we heard a lot of talk under the previous Conservative government about levelling up, which led to certain local areas being favoured over others, while the rest of us, Madam Deputy Speaker, wondered when was it our turn at the table. I welcome this Labour government's change to that approach. Less selective, no longer pitting area against area, but a genuine desire to grow every part of the United Kingdom. Our Labour Mayor, Madam Deputy Speaker, Claire Ward, has started working with government to find areas to grow the local economy. In the last year, she secured £200 million of transport investment, which will grow our economy by allowing people to get about our region more easily. She secured £160 million invested in the East Midlands Investment Zone to attract new investment and create jobs. And she secured the Brownfield Housing Fund, which will build 1,400 new homes. But she is held back by the previous government's piecemeal approach to devolution.
Will you give way on that?
Of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and taking this intervention, and indeed for securing this important debate tonight. I was recently in discussion with the managing director of a local SME based on Merlin Way in Ilkeston, my constituency, and he expressed great frustration at the barriers to growth that his firm experiences with planning, high building costs and uncertainty. Does my honourable friend agree with me that devolution via empowered regional mayors represents the solution to these problems and a route to prosperity through growth?
I thank the honourable member for Erewash, who's a good friend and a powerful advocate for his constituents, and he's right, devolution in the East Midlands needs to go further and faster, Madam Deputy Speaker, because areas like Greater Manchester and the West Midlands are much further ahead on their journey. Giving the East Midlands Mayoral Authority trailblazer status would see a turbocharged approach to skills, investment and growth in our area. Giving Mayor Claire Ward integrated funding settlement across local growth, place, transport, skills, housing and more to work with local authorities like mine in Gedling would really get our economy moving. This approach has been proven elsewhere. We should not need to wait any longer in the East Midlands for power over our own future. But mayors, Madam Deputy Speaker, and combined authorities are only one part of local government across the East Midlands. It is councils, borough, county and unitary, that often do the overlooked, often ignored, hard yards that actually provide growth in our communities. The government recognises that to grow the economy, it has to work hand in hand with business. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it also has to work hand in hand with local government. Public services are essential for social and economic security. Vital services like education, housing, healthcare, transport, these contribute to the economic productivity of the region, and local authorities provide the best investment in local areas. The Local Government Association, Madam Deputy Speaker, found that councils in the East Midlands directly contributed to 20% of local GDP through projects that promote business growth, job creation and regional investment. Local authorities are key enablers for the government's promises around transport, housing, skills and growth. The government is rightly reforming the planning system to allow council planners to do their job, but every single one of the 1.5 million houses built under this government will have been approved by a council planner, and it's local authority workers that will be instrumental in the rollout of free breakfast clubs across schools. And we have seen the impact on growth and economic confidence if simple things like our bin collections go wrong. Our local government workers, Madam Deputy Speaker, keep our communities and this country ticking. They are all heroes. So my plea to the government is simple. Do not ignore local government, or local government finances, or local government staff. Continue to invest in these areas. And ultimately, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course I'll give way.
I commend the honourable member for what he's saying this evening, and of course the East Midlands are a vital region of our country, but I just would caution him slightly about wanting a regional mayor to take power upwards. In Greater London, our experience is that power at local authorities, as he's saying, is actually better. We want local money spent on local people's priorities. If you put everything up to this regional mayor, he may find that the money is actually not spent on the priorities he's hoping for, that goes up to one bureaucracy, and local people's priorities are often ignored. That's our experience in the London Borough of Havering.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for sharing his view with me. I have to say it's not a view we share in the East Midlands. We have a partnership approach with our Labour Mayor, Claire Ward, in the East Midlands, working with brilliant local Labour councils, and I'd have a slight degree of sympathy for the Honourable Member if he hadn't been coming here for the last 14 years, voting for cuts against local councils in the East Midlands, where they took 60p out of every pound of their budgets. Ultimately, Madam Deputy Speaker, where you have good, soundly managed local authorities with boundaries that local people understand and prefer, like in my borough of Gedling, do you really want local authority staff focused on a multi-year reorganisation process? Or do you want them getting on with the job and growing their local economies? The government has rightly pointed out that certainty is essential to economic growth. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I be as bold as to suggest that certainty in local government, whether it's a planner knowing that they have a job in the future, or whether it's a local authority knowing it will exist in 2 years' time, is also essential. Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituents have told me loud and clear that they don't want to see a change to their local council. It's important to me that their voice is heard and listened to in this chamber, and important that they are listened to in this debate. I share their pride in having a well-run local council in Gedling Borough Council, with low council tax, low levels of debt and decent delivered public services, and I'll argue for that to the hilt. Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be remiss of me to speak in this debate without highlighting some local examples that affect my constituents of how things can terribly go wrong. Conservative-controlled Nottinghamshire County Council might just be the worst council in the country for road repairs. Over 25% of Nottinghamshire's minor roads required repairs last year. And how many minor roads did Nottinghamshire County Council actually get around to repairing? 2.3%. For every 10 potholes, the Conservatives in Nottinghamshire only managed to fix less than one. I reckon, Madam Deputy Speaker, that if we need drivers for any future moon landing, the residents of Nottinghamshire may well volunteer to be first. The number of craters we have to dodge on our local roads just to get about our daily lives means that everyone in Nottinghamshire is an expert in dodging potholes. Navigating the pothole-ridden roads of Nottinghamshire has gone beyond a joke. It's a daily misery for the people of Gedling I serve. But it also impacts our economy. I will give way.
I congratulate my honourable friend for this securing this debate and for his very powerfully made comments about the potholes in Nottinghamshire. But the worst area for potholes, according to the RAC, is Conservative-run Derbyshire. Yeah. So would he agree it's about time that we got councils that will be working with the government to ensure that we have the roads that people need that aren't full of potholes?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Derby North, and the powerful argument she's making on behalf of her constituents. And may I gently say to her that I think there's something we share in common, having a Conservative-run county council, and in less than a month's time, the residents in our both respective constituencies have a chance to turn a page on that failure and elect Labour councils that will turn a corner. It also, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, where you see potholes across roads, impacts on our economy. Because if a trader's vehicle hits a pothole and needs to be in the repair shop for a week, that is a week they are not doing business. Their business suffers, their family suffers, and our national economy suffers too. One of my constituents, Madam Deputy Speaker, a new mother, was crossing the road with her newborn daughter in a pram when the pram snagged on a pothole, causing the mother to tip over her newborn baby, almost ending up in the middle of a busy road. She wrote to me. People had slammed on the brakes and jumped out of their cars to check whether her newborn baby had been badly hurt. The mother and the baby had to spend the afternoon at hospital that day when they should have been shopping and meeting friends on the local high street. Madam Deputy Speaker, even without the use of a car, potholes are hurting growth and at times physically hurting our constituents. And if a parent hits a pothole and suffers hundreds of pounds of damage in their own vehicle, that's money not being spent in our local shops or on our local high streets, despite, Madam Deputy Speaker, record investment by this Labour government in fixing potholes of £1.6 billion. Yeah. The Conservatives on Nottinghamshire County Council can't get a grip, and not just on potholes. The County Council is also failing to issue education and healthcare plans on time. Nearly 1,000 requests for an EHC plan between January and October were issued late. 6% fewer annual reviews of EHC plans were conducted when compared to the previous year. The impact of the Conservative-led Nottinghamshire County Council failing to deliver on SEND services, and in many ways going backwards, is that some children are not getting the education they need. And this is forcing some parents in my constituency and across the East Midlands to stay at home to school their children rather than going to work, hurting their livelihoods, hurting their opportunity to contribute to the economy, and hurting growth as a result too. Madam Deputy Speaker, in contrast, Labour-run Gedling Borough Council is investing in our high streets by maintaining its popular free 2 hours parking policy across all high street car parks. Labour-run Gedling created the beautiful 365-acre Gedling Country Park, a boost to the local economy. Gedling Labour saved and refurbished the cherished Bonington Theatre and is investing in CCTV across communities to keep people safe. The Arnold Marketplace in Arnold is an example of how to do regeneration well, led by Gedling Labour. I was proud to be part of it on Gedling Borough Council, and it's things like this that will boost our economy. Beyond the High Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, Gedling Borough Council have shown that investing in our parks and green spaces, our theatres and leisure centres, keeping our cultural centres open, invites local people into the area, which supports local businesses and growth. It's why, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm so proud of the hard work that's being done by our Labour candidates in Gedling. Sarah O'Connor and Henry Wheeler in Arnold North, John Clark and Liz Clooney in Arnold South, Jim Creamer and Errol Henry in Carlton West, Kate Carmichael in Carlton East, and Dean Wilson in Calverton. The contrast, Madam Deputy Speaker, could not be clearer. Yet more failure and poorly managed services under the Nottinghamshire Conservatives, strangling our local economy and failing to fix our broken roads, or pride being restored to our communities by hard-working councillors under Gedling Labour, growing the economy, bringing back community policing, supporting our high streets and fixing the potholes, or yet more failure to deliver with the Nottinghamshire Conservatives. That's the choice on offer next month at the local elections, and that's the choice that residents in Gedling can choose. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Natalie Fleet.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for Gedling for securing this debate, and I can assure him that potholes are as bad in Conservative-run Derbyshire County Council as they are in Nottinghamshire. So our area has been shut out of the conversation around economic growth for too long. I'm excited to see the change with a Labour East Midlands Mayor and a Labour government. A government that recently confirmed £15 million for Bolsover District Council, which will see 8 projects delivered to boost business and tourism across Pinxton, Shirebrook and Bolsover. However, there is one area that desperately needs investment so that we can unlock our economic potential, and that is transport. 80% of residents in Bolsover live in transport-related social exclusion. That's compared to 18% of residents across England. It's the second highest in the whole of the country. From South Normanton to Marlborough, transport issues affect growth and have a huge impact on everyday life. People in Clown are desperate for a bus to Chesterfield Royal Hospital. Just last week, Morton was cut off completely from public transport after its bus was first cancelled and then reinstated, but with Moreton taken off the route? How can people get to work if there is no bus service to take them? How do parents get their little ones to childcare? Why would a business invest in areas where people cannot get to their employer? Who is to blame? Derbyshire County Council must take responsibility. The Conservative-run council has a bus service improvement plan, but buses continue to fail residents across Bolsover. Bus services are reduced, villages are cut off, and buses are either late or don't turn up at all. Rural communities rely on buses for growth, for work and for leisure. Conservative Derbyshire County Council are letting us down. Bolsover deserves better, and I would urge anyone who agrees to make this known at the ballot box on the 1st of May. Thank you.
Before I call anybody else in debate, can I just ask members very gently that they need to have asked permission from the member in charge and the Minister and myself. Now, I know that some people have contacted the Speaker's office. Can I just ask people who haven't contacted the member in charge and the Minister to not stand? Oh. Minister Alex Norris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Gedling, for securing this debate and raising both the economic challenges and the opportunities faced by our communities across the East Midlands. And it's a personal thrill for me. He and I have been friends for a long time, and he and I have been talking about these issues an awful lot as members of our council in our days, and beyond that, perhaps over a pint in town from time to time. So to be able to do that in this place, and on the occasion of his first, I believe, adjournment debate, is a real personal thrill. And I shared so much of what he said, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the potential and some of the investment this government's doing to change the trends that he's discussed. Because the Midlands is the largest regional economy outside of London, and there is plenty, I think, for us to support. And for us...
Order.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Minister Alex Norris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is our firmest belief as government that economic growth, and obviously colleagues will have heard a lot from us about the primacy of growth, but that economic growth should reach all communities and drive a real rise in living standards across the country, particularly for those areas that have been left behind. And again, I shared my honourable friend's analysis of the lack of investment in recent years in the East Midlands, but also I share his analysis of our potential, our resources, our heritage, particularly our industrial heritage, as well as the benefits that our location brings. So we know that there is a lot to do and a lot to back in our part of the world. So I'm going to talk about some of those things, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we're doing as a government. And I was delighted and proud that last month, as a cornerstone of our plan for change, we announced our new Plan for Neighbourhoods, a £1.5 billion programme to ignite renewal and fight deprivation, revitalising local communities. And the East Midlands is at the heart of that programme, with 10 areas selected to receive a long-term investment of up to £20 million of funding and 10 years of support to reach their full potential. Recipients in the East Midlands include Boston, Skegness and Spalding in Lincolnshire, Chesterfield in Derbyshire, across Nottinghamshire. We've got Worksop, Newark-on-Trent, Mansfield, Ashfield, Clifton and indeed Carlton in the constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Gedling. And they will all be worthy beneficiaries of this fund to rebuild, restore, rejuvenate neglected infrastructure and fractured communities. We also believe that driving growth that is sustainable, innovative and green is an anchoring part of our mission to be a clean energy superpower. And we in the East Midlands, with our heritage in the energy space, are brilliantly poised to lead the green energy revolution. Earlier this year, in January, we announced a record £410 million investment to develop cutting-edge clean energy, which will include the creation of a world-leading STEP prototype fusion energy plant in Nottinghamshire. This investment puts the UK at the forefront of fusion delivery, firmly on the path to net zero, and recognises the East Midlands region as pioneers of the clean energy of the future. On housing, in October we allocated nearly £17 million of the £68 million brownfield land release funding to the East Midlands, and that means a dozen schemes in Derby, Derbyshire, Nottingham, Nottinghamshire have been identified for grants to support the construction of nearly 1,500 homes in the region. These housing developments will revitalise underused sites in our cities and communities, with work already commencing on some locations. And a particularly significant housing announcement is one that's particularly close to my heart. And that's what I am so proud to say from this dispatch box as a Nottingham MP and as a government minister, that following the announcement on the 31st of March, we are delivering a significant milestone boost to the regeneration of Nottingham City Centre through the acquisition by Homes England of the Broadmarsh site. It feels good. There will be many people in Nottingham who say that that is overdue by years, possibly multiple decades, and I wouldn't fight that contention. But this is a huge step forward for the City of Nottingham. This development will create 1,000 homes, up to 20,000 square metres of retail, office and community space, and generate around 2,000 full-time jobs, complementing the establishment of Nottingham College Hub next door, the opening of the Central Library there as well, the bus station, the new car parks, and the completion of the Green Heart public realm. And as I say, perhaps it has taken too long. In fact, no doubt it has taken too long, but this will be a wonderful development for our community. And the Honourable Gentleman mentions the importance of local leadership. I commend the leadership of Councillor Nagat Khan and Councillor Ethan Radford in driving this forward. The Honourable Gentleman mentions the important work of the East Midlands Combined County Authority, and I completely share that. We have made a commitment as a new government that we fundamentally believe in a new settlement in this country, and at the heart of this new settlement is the transfer of money and power from this place and from Whitehall to Town Hall, and at the forefront of that will be our devolved administrations, our combined authorities. And the MCA investment fund of £9.5 million will support key projects to break down barriers to opportunity and significantly boost growth in our region. This is funding to be allocated for projects that invest in homes, jobs, manufacturing, clean energy and greener spaces in order to create thriving local places, with a number of specific projects set to benefit, including the South Derbyshire Growth Zone, a £1.5 million investment for a new junction on the A50 Trunk Road, which will unlock plans to build 4,500 homes and nearly 3.5 million square feet of commercial floor space. The Trent Clean Energy Supercluster in Bassetlaw, £3 million to advance the transformation of 3 former coal-fired power stations along the Trent into a world-leading clean energy and innovation centre, again leaning into our past and helping us build our future. The Derby City Urban Quarter, £3.75 million to transform priority areas in Derby City, creating a vibrant, sustainable and accessible urban quarter.
Would the Minister give way?
I'll happily give way.
Derby City Council is working with partners beginning to deliver transformative regeneration, like Valent Live, a new 3,500 capacity performance venue which has just opened, a refurbished market hall about to open, a new university business school nearly finished, and the £20 million being delivered by this government to our 2 theatres. So would the Minister agree that regenerating our city centres is key to unlocking the economic growth across the region? And can the Minister outline how this government is supporting local council leaders to generate growth in their local areas?
I'm grateful for that intervention. I think the Honourable Lady puts a very thoughtful and perhaps very well judged counterweight to my love letter to Nottingham City Centre for Derby City Centre too, because perhaps she knew it was just too far beyond me to overcome our traditional rivalries to do so, but she did so better than I could have done so, and I think that's really important. Derby's got some very exciting days ahead of it because of the investments, because of the creativity of local leaders and the local community in enhancing that space. The thing for me, to speak to the final part of her question, is that we get to them the tools and the resources to do so. I'll talk a little bit about local government finance in a second, but we want to make sure that they have the powers. I will shortly, whether it's high street rental auctions or similar, to make sure that they have the powers to shape their community. I give way.
I thank the Minister very much for giving way, and he talks about the dichotomy between Nottingham and Derby. As the Member of Parliament for Erewash, which sits at the halfway mark between two, I felt obliged to come in at this point, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've seen firsthand the massive improvements that the Labour administration has made at Erewash Borough Council in the 2 short years since they took control, from encouraging solar farms to helping community events to liberalising the grants programmes for businesses to introducing £2 million of new investments to Erewash. Will the Minister join me in congratulating the fantastic Erewash Labour Group and the broader Erewash Borough Council?
Yeah. I'm grateful for that intervention. I mean, I don't think we could litigate in the remaining 22 minutes whether Long Eaton is in Nottingham or in Derby. The honourable gentleman perhaps is better qualified to say than me. All I would say is that when I go to see him, I do see a lot of Forest shirts. But he is right to highlight the work of his council. They've not had very long in power, but they have taken a very progressive, a very ambitious approach to shaping place there. And I'm always very proud to work with James and colleagues. To mention a couple more of those investments, Infinity Park, also in Derby, £1.5 million for a research and development facility within EMCA's investment zone to support advanced manufacturing and nuclear sectors. And the Avenue site, Southern Access in North East Derbyshire, £1 million for creating a southern access to the Avenue site, improving access for vehicles, pedestrians and enabling future development. And these developments show the vital role of devolution in unlocking the power and potential of regeneration across regions by giving that investment back into the hands of local people. And to think that EMCA's not even had its first year, the impact has been monumental, which I think makes this the perfect opportunity to recognise and reflect on the outstanding leadership of Mayor Claire Ward, who again has not had even a year in post, but has made all the impacts of the things I've talked about. The reason those projects are happening, the reason the projects are happening on brownfield sites and much more is because of her leadership. And the reality is the decisions made in the East Midlands should be taken by the people of the East Midlands. And that is why we will continue to back Claire. My honourable friend, the member from Strangford, mentioned Freeports. That's just another sign of us wanting to get the powers and the resources to EMCA so that Claire can show that leadership and we can all collectively drive the region forward. And the honourable gentleman made very important points around integrated settlements. You won't be surprised to hear that Mayor Clare makes the exact same points to myself and other ministers on a daily basis, and the points are well made. And to speak to the important contribution from my honourable friend, the member for Bolsover, again, that transport insight I think is best played through our combined authority, and again it's incumbent on us at this dispatch box to deliver the right powers and resources in order to do so. But of course there is the I would say age-old, but it's actually quite a new problem, Madam Deputy Speaker, of an East Midlands mayoralty that doesn't quite cover all of the East Midlands. I am delighted that the region is on the cusp of its second devolution success with the upcoming election in less than a month of the Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority Mayor. That will bring £750 million of investment over 30 years, with an initial £20 million capital funding to drive place-based economic regeneration. That is a great step forwards, and that is part of, as we've made good in the English Devolution White Paper, our commitment to a significant shift of power and resource from this place to local communities. I give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I think when we talk about devolution, we can't forget Leicestershire, that's in a devolution desert. My constituency of North West Leicestershire borders both Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. We have an international airport, but significantly, we have no passenger rail. And I just wanted to ask the Minister if he agrees with me that actual effective public transport is key to unlocking growth across the whole of the East Midlands.
I very much do so. I think it should be a point of great pride that, and again, it's one of our huge assets that we have the biggest pure freight airport in the country. Our geographic location means that, frankly, all journeys that involve the transport of goods tend to come through us at some point, but in this case, in the case of the airport, very directly. I think the point she raises, as my honourable friend, the member for Bolsover, does, that one of our challenges in the East Midlands is around linking up our opportunities by having that right access and that right public transport. I think that's absolutely crucial, and that I think will be the next dimension must be of our efforts. But I wanted to also give her the assurance, having had the exact same conversation with formerly of this parish, Madam Deputy Speaker, Andy Reid, who's the chair of the business board in Leicester and Leicestershire, of our commitment to making sure that they can have the devolution and gaps at the moment can also build a bright and more sustainable future for their communities, and we will work with them in whatever way we can. I mean, my honourable friend, the member for Gedling, was exactly right in saying that we can't forget the importance of our local councils. I'm very proud to be a former member of my council. I'm also very proud, having seen how hard it's been in recent years for local authorities, that at the recent budget we started that journey of rebuilding local finances. I think we're going to start to see much better services as a result, and people will feel that change, and we have to. I want to cover, before I close, the point the honourable gentleman made. He said with a degree of boldness with regards to local government reorganisation. Now, having, as I did, I think, make the case strongly for the devolution of power, I think colleagues will know that my belief is that decisions are better taken locally than in this place, and we will certainly shift power in that regard. I think we do have to have a degree of responsibility that where we add tiers of government, we rationalise other tiers. I think of parts of my own constituency that have 5 tiers of government now. They have an elected mayor, they have myself and this place, they have a county council, they have a borough council, they have a town council. I don't think it's unreasonable that we should want to bring those things forward, but he makes very, very important points about the importance of getting voice of local communities into the room. And that, of course, will be the moment now. We have, I think, over the next few months to November, when we expect proposals to be submitted, we have that opportunity to have those conversations. We're at proposal stage. We're going to make sure that communities have the right insight to make the right judgments about their future, and those are conversations we'll facilitate and be part of too. So, to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, our region, the thing I think that frustrates me about our city, my city and our region, was that we've had 4 really difficult decades. There's no doubt about that. And you see the scars, physical, societal, all across the area and the memories that we've lived with. For too long we've talked about, or been, even worse, been talked about in the deficit of what's wrong with us, what we don't have. I'm really pleased with the spirit of this debate and the spirit of debate about our region over the last year, and certainly in this new Parliament, is one that talks about the great opportunities there are in the East Midlands, which are huge and abundant. We as a government will back them, but most importantly, it will be local leaders, the elected mayor, council leaders, local members of Parliament and the local community that shape and deliver and drive that. I think that's the right way round, and I can't wait to see what we can collectively achieve. Thank you very much.
The question is that this House to now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.